Chapter 15. In that year there was a severe famine throughout the land of Canaan, and the inhabitants could not stay because the famine was very severe. Abram and all who belonged to him went down to Egypt because of the famine. When they reached the brook Mitzrayim, they stayed there for a while to rest from their journey. While Abram and Sarai were walking by the brook Mitzrayim, Abram noticed that his wife Sarai was very beautiful. Abram said to his wife Sarai, "Since Yahuwah has created you with such a beautiful appearance, I am afraid the Egyptians might kill me and take you away, because the fear of Yahuwah is not in these places. Therefore you should do this. Tell anyone who asks that you are my sister, so that things will go well for me, and we will live and not be killed." Abram gave the same instructions to everyone who came with him to Egypt because of the famine. He also commanded his nephew Lot, saying, "If the Egyptians ask you about Sarai, say she is Abram's sister." Despite giving these instructions, Abram still didn't feel confident. He took Sarai and placed her in a chest, hiding it among their belongings, because he was very worried about Sarai due to the wickedness of the Egyptians. When Abram and his group left the brook Mitzrayim and arrived in Egypt, they had barely entered the city gates when the guards stopped them, saying, "Pay the king's tax from what you have, and then you may enter the town." Abram and his people did so. As they entered Egypt with their belongings, they brought the chest containing Sarai, and the Egyptians noticed it. The king's servants approached Abram, asking, "What do you have in this chest that we haven't seen? Open it and pay the tax to the king for its contents." Abram replied, "I won't open this chest, but I will pay whatever tax you demand for it." Pharaoh's officers responded, "It must be a chest of precious stones. Give us 1/10 of its value." Abram said, "I will give you whatever you ask, but the chest must remain closed." However, the king's officers pressured Abram and forcibly opened the chest. Inside they found a beautiful woman. When the officers saw Sarai, they were amazed by her beauty. All of Pharaoh's princes and servants gathered to see her, for she was extraordinarily beautiful. The king's officers rushed to tell Pharaoh what they had seen, praising Sarai to him. Pharaoh ordered her to be brought to him, and she was presented before the king. Pharaoh was captivated by Sarai's beauty and was overjoyed to have her. He gave rewards to those who had brought him news of her. When Sarai was taken to Pharaoh's house, Abram was deeply troubled about his wife and prayed to Yahuwah to rescue her from Pharaoh's control. Sarai also prayed, saying, "O Yahuwah, you told my husband Abram to leave his land and his father's house for the land of Canaan, and you promised to bless him if he followed your commands. We have done as you commanded, leaving our land and families to go to a strange land and unknown people. We came here to escape the famine, and now this terrible thing has happened. Please, Yahuwah, save us from this oppressor and show us mercy." Yahuwah heard Sarai's prayer and sent an angel to rescue her from Pharaoh's power. When the king came to see Sarai, an angel of Yahuwah stood over them. The angel appeared to Sarai and said, "Don't be afraid, for Yahuwah has heard your prayer." The king asked Sarai, "Who is that man who brought you here?" She answered, "He is my brother." The king said, "We should honor him, elevate his position, and do whatever good things you request for him." Then the king sent Abram silver, gold, and many precious stones, along with cattle, male and female servants. The king had Abram brought to him and seated in the royal court, and greatly honored him that night. When the king approached Sarai and reached out to touch her, the angel struck him hard. He was terrified and withdrew his hand. Each time the king came near Sarai, the angel knocked him to the ground, continuing this throughout the night. The king was terrified. That night the angel severely struck all the king's servants and his entire household because of Sarai, causing great distress among the people of Pharaoh's house. Seeing what was happening to him, Pharaoh said, "Surely this woman is the cause of these troubles." He moved away from her and spoke kindly to her. The king asked Sarai, "Please tell me about the man you came here with." Sarai replied, "He is my husband. I told you he was my brother because I was afraid you would kill him." The king stayed away from Sarai, and the angel's plagues stopped afflicting him and his household. Pharaoh realized he had been punished because of Sarai, and he was greatly amazed. In the morning the king called for Abram and said, "What have you done to me? Why did you say she was your sister, causing me to take her as my wife and bring this severe plague upon me and my household? Here is your wife. Take her and leave our land before we all die because of her." Pharaoh gave Abram more cattle, servants, silver and gold, and returned Sarai to him. The king took one of his concubine's daughters and gave her to Sarai as a servant. The king told his daughter, "It is better for you to be a servant in this man's house than to be a mistress in mine, after seeing the trouble that came upon us because of this woman." Abram left with all his belongings, and Pharaoh ordered some of his men to escort them. Abram returned to Canaan, to the place where he had built the altar, and first pitched his tent. Lot, son of Haran and Abram's nephew, had many cattle, flocks, herds, and tents, for Yahuwah had blessed them because of Abram. While they were living in the land, Lot's herdsmen began arguing with Abram's herdsmen because they had too much property to stay together, and the land couldn't support all their livestock. When Abram's herdsmen grazed their flocks, they avoided the fields belonging to the local people, but Lot's herdsmen let their cattle graze in others' fields. The local people saw this happening daily and complained to Abram about Lot's herdsmen. Abram said to Lot, "Why are you making me look bad to the local people by letting your herdsmen graze in others' fields? Don't you know I'm a stranger here among the Canaanites? Why are you doing this to me?" Abram confronted Lot about this daily, but Lot wouldn't listen and continued the same practices, and the locals kept complaining to Abram. Finally, Abram said to Lot, "How long will you continue to cause problems between me and the local people? Please, let's stop quarreling. We're family. I ask you to separate from me. Go choose a place where you can live with your cattle and belongings, but keep your distance from me and your household. Don't worry about leaving me. If anyone wrongs you, let me know and I will defend you. Just please move away." After Abram said this, Lot looked toward the Jordan Valley. He saw that the whole area was well watered and good for both people and livestock. So Lot left Abram and went to that place, settling in Sodom, and they separated from each other. Abram lived in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron. He pitched his tent there and stayed in that place for many years. Chapter 16. At that time Chedorlaomer king of Elam sent messages to all the neighboring kings, to Nimrod, king of Shinar, who was then under his power, to Tidal, king of Goyim, and to Arioch, king of Elasar. He made a covenant with them, saying, "Come help me, so we can strike all the towns of Sodom and its inhabitants, for they have rebelled against me these 13 years. These 4 kings went up with all their armies, about 800,000 men, and they advanced, striking down everyone they encountered on their path. The 5 kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, Shinab king of Admah, Shemeber king of Zeboim, Bera king of Sodom, Bersha king of Gomorrah, and Bela king of Zoar, went out to meet them, and they all joined together in the valley of Siddim. These 9 kings waged war in the valley of Siddim, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were defeated before the kings of Elam. The valley of Siddim was full of lime pits, and when the kings of Elam pursued the kings of Sodom and their armies fled and fell into the lime pits. Those who remained fled to the mountain for safety. The 5 kings of Elam pursued them to the gates of Sodom and took everything that was in Sodom. They plundered all the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they also captured Lot, Abram's nephew, and his property. They seized all the goods of the cities of Sodom and departed. Eunuch, Abram's servant, who was in the battle, saw this and told Abram everything the kings had done to the cities of Sodom, and that Lot had been taken captive. When Abram heard this, he gathered about 318 men who were with him, and that night pursued these kings and defeated them. They all fell before Abram and his men, except for the 4 kings who fled, each going his own way. Abram recovered all the property of Sodom, and he also rescued Lot and his property, his wives and children, and all belonging to him, so that Lot lacked nothing. When he returned from defeating these kings, he and his men passed through the valley of Siddim, where the kings had fought. Bera king of Sodom and his remaining men, who had escaped from the lime pits, went out to meet Abram and his men. Adonizedek king of Jerusalem, who was Shem, went out with his men to meet Abram and his people, bringing bread and wine, and they stayed together in the valley of Melech. Adonizedek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him 1/10 of all the spoils he had taken from his enemies, for Adonizedek was a priest before Yahuwah. All the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah who were there, along with their servants, approached Abram and begged him to return their captured servants, saying he could keep all the other property. Abram answered the kings of Sodom, saying, "As Yahuwah lives, who created heaven and earth, and who rescued my soul from all affliction, and who delivered me today from my enemies and gave them into my hand, I will not take anything belonging to you. This way you cannot say tomorrow, Abram became rich from our property that he saved." For Yahuwah, my Elohim, in whom I trust, said to me, "You shall lack nothing, for I will bless you in all the works of your hands. Therefore here is everything that belongs to you. Take it and go. As Yahuwah lives, I will not take from you anything from a living soul down to a shoelace or thread, except for the food expenses of those who went to battle with me, and the portions for the men who went with me, Anar, Ashkol, and Mamre. They and their men, as well as those who stayed to watch the baggage, shall take their portion of the spoils." The kings of Sodom offered Abram whatever he chose to take, according to all he had said, but he refused. He sent away the kings of Sodom and their remaining men, giving them instructions about Lot, and they returned to their respective places. He also sent Lot, his nephew, away with his property, and Lot returned to his home in Sodom, while Abram and his people returned to their home in the plains of Mamre, which is in Hebron. At that time, Yahuwah appeared again to Abram in Hebron and said to him, "Do not fear, your reward is very great before me, for I will not leave you until I have multiplied you and blessed you, and made your descendants as numerous as the stars in heaven, which cannot be measured or counted. I will give to your descendants all these lands that you see with your eyes. To them I will give them as an inheritance forever. Only be strong and do not fear. Walk before me and be perfect." In the 78th year of Abram's life, Reu, the son of Peleg, died. Reu lived for 239 years. Sarai, Abram's wife, the daughter of Haran, was still childless in those days. She had not borne any children to Abram. When she saw that she bore no children, she took her maidservant Hagar, whom Pharaoh had given her, and gave her to Abram her husband as a wife. Hagar had learned all of Sarai's ways as Sarai had taught her, and she followed her good ways completely. Sarai said to Abram, "Here is my maidservant Hagar. Go to her so she may bear children for me, that I may also have children through her." After Abram had lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years, in the 85th year of his life, Sarai gave Hagar to him. Abram listened to his wife Sarai's voice, and he took Hagar, and she conceived. When Hagar saw that she had conceived, she rejoiced greatly, and she looked down on her mistress, thinking to herself, "This must mean that I am more favored before Yahuwah than my mistress Sarai, for all the time my mistress has been with Yahuwah, she hasn't conceived, but I conceived by him so quickly." When Sarai saw that Hagar had conceived by Abram, she became jealous of her maidservant and thought to herself, "This surely means that she must be better than I am." Sarai said to Abram, "This wrong is your fault. When you prayed to Yahuwah for children, why didn't you pray for me that Yahuwah would give me children from you? When I speak to Hagar in your presence, she disrespects my words because she has conceived, and you say nothing to her. May Yahuwah judge between me and you for what you have done to me." Abram said to Sarai, "Look, your maidservant is in your power, and do with her as you see fit." So Sarai treated her harshly, and Hagar fled from her to the wilderness. An angel of Yahuwah found her by a well in the wilderness and said to her, "Do not fear, for I will multiply your descendants. You will bear a son, and you shall call him Ishmael. Now return to your mistress Sarai and submit to her authority." Hagar named that well Beer Lahairoi. It lies between Kadesh and the wilderness of Bered. Hagar then returned to her master's house, and in due time she bore a son to Abram, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Chapter 17. In those days, in the 91st year of Abram's life, the children of Chittim went to war with the children of Tubal. When Yahuwah had scattered the people across the face of the earth, the children of Chittim had settled in the plain of Canopia, built cities there, and lived by the river Tibro. The children of Tubal lived in Tuscana, and their territory extended to the river Tibro. The children of Tubal built a city in Tuscanan and named it Sabina, after Sabina, son of Tubal, their father, and they have lived there to this day. At that time, the children of Chittim fought against the children of Tubal, and the children of Tubal were defeated by the children of Chittim, who killed 370 men of Tubal. After this, the children of Tubal made an oath to the children of Chittim, saying, "We will not intermarry with you, and no man among us will give his daughter to any of the sons of Chittim." In those days, all the daughters of Tubal were beautiful, for no women as beautiful as the daughters of Tubal could be found anywhere on earth. All who were attracted to beautiful women went to the daughters of Tubal and married them. The sons of men, kings and princes, who greatly admired beautiful women, took wives from among the daughters of Tubal in those days. 3 years after the children of Tubal had sworn not to give their daughters as wives to the children of Chittim, about 20 men of the children of Chittim went looking for some of the daughters of Tubal, but found none. For the children of Tubal kept their oath not to intermarry with them and refused to break their word. During harvest time, when the children of Tubal went to their fields to gather their harvest, the young men of Chittim gathered together and went to the city of Sabina. Each man took a young woman from among the daughters of Tubal, and they returned to their cities. When the children of Tubal heard of this, they went to fight them but could not succeed, because the mountain was too high for them to climb. When they saw they could not prevail, they returned to their land. After a year had passed, the children of Tubal hired about 10,000 men from nearby cities and went to war with the children of Chittim. The children of Tubal fought against the children of Chittim to destroy their land and cause them distress. In this battle, the children of Tubal gained the upper hand over the children of Chittim. When the children of Chittim saw that they were in great trouble, they took the children they had with the daughters of Tubal and placed them on the wall they had built, so the children of Tubal would see them. The children of Chittim called out to them, "Have you come to make war against your own sons and daughters? Haven't we been considered your flesh and blood from that time until now?" When the children of Tubal heard this, they stopped fighting with the children of Chittim and went away. They returned to their cities, and the children of Chittim then gathered together and built 2 cities by the sea, naming one Purtu and the other Ariza. At this time Abram son of Terah was 99 years old. Then Yahweh appeared to him and said, "I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will greatly multiply your descendants. This is the covenant I make between me and you. Every male child must be circumcised, you and your descendants after you. They shall be circumcised when they are 8 days old, and this covenant shall be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. Therefore your name will no longer be called Abram but Abraham, and your wife will no longer be called Sarai but Sarah. For I will bless you both, and I will multiply your descendants after you, so that you will become a great nation, and kings will come from your line." Chapter 18. Abraham followed all that Yahweh had commanded him. He took the men of his household and those he had bought with money, and circumcised them as Yahweh had instructed. He didn't leave anyone uncircumcised. Abraham and his son Ishmael were both circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised. On the 3rd day, while still in pain from the circumcision, Abraham went out of his tent and sat at the entrance to enjoy the sun's warmth. Yahweh appeared to him in the plain of Mamre and sent 3 of his ministering angels to visit him. As Abraham sat at the tent entrance, he looked up and saw 3 men approaching from a distance. He got up and ran to meet them, bowed down to them, and invited them into his house. He said to them, "If I have found favor in your sight, please stay and have some food." He insisted, and they agreed. He gave them water to wash their feet and had them sit under a tree by the tent entrance. Abraham hurried to select a choice, tender calf, and gave it to his servant Eliezer to prepare. Abraham went to Sarah in the tent and said, "Quickly prepare 3 measures of fine flour, knead it, and make bread to serve with the meat." She did as he asked. Abraham hurried to bring them butter, milk, beef, and mutton, serving these before the calf was fully prepared, and they ate. After they finished eating, one of them said to him, "I will return to you at the appointed time, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Then the men departed and went their separate ways to their assigned destinations. In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 cities were extremely wicked and sinful against Yahuwah. They provoked Yahuwah with their abominations, becoming increasingly corrupt and scornful before Yahuwah. Their wickedness and crimes were great in Yahuwah's sight. They had a vast valley in their land, about half a day's walk across, with water springs and abundant vegetation around the water. All the people of Sodom and Gomorrah would go there 4 times a year with their wives, children, and belongings to celebrate with music and dancing. During these celebrations, they would seize their neighbors' wives and virgin daughters and assault them, and everyone watched their own wives and daughters being taken without saying anything. They would do this from morning until night, then return to their homes and tents. This happened 4 times every year. When strangers came to their cities with goods to sell, the people would gather, men, women, children, young and old, and take the goods by force, each person taking a small portion until nothing was left of what the merchant had brought. If the merchant complained, saying, "What have you done to me?" they would approach him one by one, each showing the small amount they took, and mocking him, saying, "I only took the little bit you gave me." After hearing this from everyone, he would leave in sorrow and bitterness, but they would all chase after him and drive him from the city with great noise and chaos. There was a man from Elam traveling on his donkey, which carried a beautiful multicolored mantle tied with a cord. As he was passing through Sodom at sunset, he stopped to spend the night, but no one would give him shelter. At that time there was a wicked and cunning man in Sodom named Hadad. Hadad saw the traveler in the street and approached him, asking, "Where do you come from and where are you going?" The man replied, "I'm traveling from Hebron to my home in Elam. The sun has set, and though I have bread, water, and provisions for my donkey, no one will let me stay in their house." Hadad said, "I'll provide everything you need, but you can't stay in the street." Hadad took him home and removed the mantle and cord from the donkey. He gave the donkey straw and feed while the traveler ate and drank in Hadad's house, staying there for the night. In the morning, when the traveler prepared to leave, Hadad said, "Wait, have some breakfast first," and the man agreed. They ate and drank together that day, and when the man tried to leave, Hadad convinced him to stay another night. The next morning, Hadad again pressed him to stay, saying, "Have some food first," and the man ate with him a second day. When he tried to leave, Hadad said, "The day is ending, stay another night and leave early tomorrow." But the man refused and began saddling his donkey. While he was doing this, Hadad's wife said to her husband, "This man has stayed with us for 2 days, eating and drinking, and hasn't given us anything. Will you let him leave without paying?" Hadad told her to be quiet. As the man prepared his donkey, he asked Hadad for the cord and mantle to tie on the donkey. Hadad replied, "What do you mean?" The man said, "My lord, please give me back the multicolored mantle and cord that you took from my donkey to keep safe." Hadad answered, "Let me interpret your dream. The cord means your life will be long like a cord, and the colorful mantle means you will have a vineyard with many types of fruit trees." The traveler protested, "No, my lord, I was awake when I gave you the actual cord and multicolored mantle that you took from my donkey to store for me." Hadad insisted, "I've given you the interpretation of your dream, and it's a good one. People usually pay me 4 silver pieces for dream interpretation, but I'll only charge you 3. The man became angry at Hadad's words and brought him before Serach, the judge of Sodom. The man presented his case to Judge Serach, but Hadad maintained his story. The judge told the traveler, "Hadad is telling the truth. He's well known in our cities for accurate dream interpretation." The man protested before the judge, saying, "No, my Yahuwah, I gave him the cord and mantle from my donkey in broad daylight for safekeeping." They argued their cases before the judge, each telling a different version. Hadad demanded, "Give me 4 silver pieces for interpreting your dream, and pay for the 4 meals you ate at my house." The man replied, "I'll pay for the food, but give me back my cord and mantle that you're hiding." Hadad repeated before the judge, "Didn't I interpret your dream? The cord means long life, and the mantle means you'll have a vineyard with all kinds of fruit trees. Now pay me the 4 silver pieces, I won't reduce the price." As they argued before the judge, he ordered his servants to drive them both out. When they continued arguing outside, the people of Sodom gathered around and turned against the stranger, driving him from the city. The man continued his journey on his donkey, bitter and weeping. He wept as he traveled, lamenting what had happened to him in the corrupt city of Sodom. Chapter 19. The cities of Sodom had 4 judges for 4 cities. These were their names: Serach in the city of Sodom, Sharkad in Gomorrah, Zabnak in Admah, and Menon in Zeboim. Eliezer, Abraham's servant, gave them different names. He changed Serach to Shakra, Sharkad to Shakrura, Zebnak to Kezabim, and Menon to Matzladin. At the request of their 4 judges, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah set up beds in the city streets. When someone came to these places, they would grab him and force him to lie in one of these beds. As he lay down, 3 men would stand at his head and 3 at his feet. They would measure him against the length of the bed. If the man was shorter than the bed, these 6 men would stretch him at each end. When he cried out to them, they would not answer. If he was longer than the bed, they would pull together the 2 sides of the bed at each end until the man was near death. If he continued crying out to them, they would answer, saying, "This is what happens to anyone who comes into our land." When people heard about what the people of Sodom's cities did, they stopped coming there. When a poor person came to their land, they would give him silver and gold, then announce throughout the city that no one should give him even a piece of bread to eat. If the stranger stayed there for several days and died from hunger, unable to get any bread, all the city's people would come at his death and take back their silver and gold. Those who could identify their silver or gold took it back, and when he died, they also stripped off his clothes and fought over them. Whoever won against their neighbor took the clothes. After that, they would carry him and bury him under desert shrubs. They did this to everyone who came to them and died in their land. Later, Sarah sent Eliezer to Sodom to check on Lot and see how he was doing. When Eliezer went to Sodom, he saw a man of Sodom fighting with a stranger. The Sodom man stripped all the poor man's clothes off and walked away. The poor man cried out to Eliezer and begged for his help because of what the Sodom man had done. He asked him, "Why do you treat the poor man who came to your land this way?" The Sodom man answered Eliezer, "Is this man your brother? Or have Sodom's people made you a judge today that you speak about this man?" Eliezer argued with the Sodom man about the poor man. When Eliezer tried to get the poor man's clothes back, the Sodom man quickly hit Eliezer in the forehead with a stone. Blood flowed heavily from Eliezer's forehead. When the man saw the blood, he grabbed Eliezer, saying, "Pay me for removing this bad blood from your forehead, as this is our land's custom and law." Eliezer said to him, "You wounded me and now want me to pay you?" Eliezer refused to listen to the Sodom man's demands. The man grabbed Eliezer and brought him to Shakra, Sodom's judge, for judgment. The man told the judge, "My lord, this is what happened. I hit him with a stone that made his forehead bleed, and he won't pay me." The judge said to Eliezer, "This man speaks truth. Pay him his fee, as this is our land's custom." When Eliezer heard the judge's words, he picked up a stone and hit the judge, making blood flow heavily from the judge's forehead. Eliezer said, "If this is your land's custom, you pay this man what I should have paid him. This was your decision, you made the rule." Eliezer left the Sodom man with the judge and departed. When the kings of Elam fought with Sodom's kings, they captured all of Sodom's property and took Lot captive with his belongings. When Abraham learned of this, he fought the kings of Elam and recovered all of Lot's property and Sodom's property. At that time Lot's wife had a daughter, and he named her Paltith, saying this was because Yahweh had saved him and his household from Elam's kings. Paltith grew up, and a man of Sodom married her. A poor man came to the city looking for food. He stayed there several days, and all of Sodom's people announced their rule not to give him any bread to eat until he died. They did this. Paltith, Lot's daughter, saw this man lying in the streets dying of hunger, with no one willing to help him survive. and he was near death. She felt deep pity for the man, and secretly fed him bread for many days, keeping him alive. When she went to get water, she would put bread in her water pitcher. When she reached where the poor man was, she would take out the bread and give it to him. She did this for many days. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah wondered how this man could survive starvation for so long. They said to each other, "He must be eating and drinking somewhere. No one can survive this long without food or even looking different." 3 men hid near where the poor man stayed to find out who was bringing him bread. When Paltith went to get water that day, she put bread in her water pitcher and went to draw water near the poor man. She took out the bread and gave it to him to eat. The 3 men saw what Paltith did and said to her, "So you're the one who's been helping him. That's why he hasn't starved or changed appearance or died like the others." They came out of hiding, grabbed Paltith and the bread from the poor man's hand. They brought Paltith before their judges and said, "This is what she did. She gave the poor man bread, which is why he hasn't died. Tell us her punishment for breaking our law." The people of Sodom and Gomorrah gathered and lit a fire in the city street. They threw the woman into the fire and burned her to ashes. In the city of Admah, they did something similar to another woman. A traveler came to Admah planning to stay the night and leave in the morning. He sat outside the door of a young woman's father's house to rest, as the sun had set when he arrived. The young woman saw him sitting by the door. He asked her for water and she said, "Who are you?" He replied, "I was traveling today and got here at sunset, so I'll stay here tonight and continue my journey early tomorrow." The young woman went inside and brought the man bread and water to eat and drink. When the people of Admah learned of this, they gathered and brought the young woman before the judges for judgment. The judge said, "She must be put to death for breaking our law. This is the decision." The people gathered and brought out the young woman. They covered her with honey from head to toe as the judge had ordered, and placed her in front of a bee swarm. The bees attacked her and stung her until her whole body swelled. The young woman screamed because of the bees, but no one helped or showed mercy. Her cries reached heaven. The Elohim was angry at this and at all the evil deeds of Sodom's cities. Though they had plenty of food and peace, they refused to help the poor and needy. Their evil actions and sins became very great before the Elohim. The Elohim sent 2 angels who had visited Abraham's house to destroy Sodom and its cities. The angels left Abraham's tent after eating and drinking, reaching Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting at Sodom's gate, and when he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down. He strongly urged them to come to his house, gave them food to eat, and they stayed the night. The angels told Lot, "Get up and leave this place with all your family, or you'll be destroyed with the city. The Elohim will destroy this place." The angels took hold of Lot, his wife, his children, and all his family, and led them outside the cities. They told Lot, "Run for your life," and he fled with his family. Then the Elohim rained sulfur and fire from heaven on Sodom and Gomorrah and all the cities. He destroyed these cities, the entire plain, all the city inhabitants and everything growing on the ground. Ado, Lot's wife, looked back to see the city's destruction because she felt sorry for her daughters who stayed in Sodom and didn't come with her. When she looked back, she became a salt pillar, which still stands there today. The oxen in that place would lick the salt up to their feet daily, and in the morning it would grow back fresh, and they would lick it again, continuing to this day. Lot and his 2 remaining daughters escaped to Adullam's cave, where they stayed for some time. Abraham got up early in the morning to see what had happened to Sodom's cities. He saw the city's smoke rising like a furnace's smoke. Lot and his 2 daughters stayed in the cave. They made their father drink wine and lay with him, saying there were no other men left on earth to have children with, as they thought the whole world was destroyed. Both daughters lay with their father and became pregnant. The firstborn named her son Moab, saying she conceived him with her father. He became the ancestor of today's Moabites. The younger daughter named her son Ben-Ammi. He became the ancestor of today's Ammonites. Afterward, Lot and his 2 daughters left that place. He lived across the Jordan with his daughters and their sons. Lot's sons grew up, married women from Canaan, had children, and their families grew large. Jasher, chapter 20. And at that time Abraham journeyed from the plain of Mamre, and went to the land of the Philistines, and he lived in Gerar. This was in the 25th year of Abraham's time in the land of Canaan, and the 100th year of his life when he came to Gerar in the land of the Philistines. When they entered the land, he said to Sarah, his wife, "Say you are my sister to anyone who asks, so we may escape the evil of the inhabitants of the land." As Abraham dwelt in the land of the Philistines, the servants of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, noticed that Sarah was extremely beautiful. They asked Abraham about her, and he said, "She is my sister." The servants of Abimelech went to him, saying, "A man from the land of Canaan has come to live here, and he has a sister who is very beautiful." Abimelech listened to his servants' praise of Sarah and sent his officers to bring her to him. When Sarah arrived at Abimelech's house, the king saw her beauty, and she pleased him greatly. He approached her and asked, "What is your relationship to the man with whom you came?" Sarah answered, "He is my brother. We came from Canaan to live wherever we could find a place." Abimelech replied, "Look, my land is before you. Let your brother live wherever he pleases. It will be our duty to honor him above all the people of this land, because he is your brother." Abimelech sent for Abraham, who came to him, and Abimelech said, "Look, I have commanded that you be honored as you desire on account of your sister Sarah." That evening, before men lay down to rest, Abimelech was sitting on his throne when a deep sleep fell upon him. He lay on his throne and slept till morning. In his dream, an angel of Yahuwah came to him with a drawn sword and stood over him, ready to kill him. Terrified, the king said to the angel, "How have I sinned against you that you come to slay me with your sword?" The angel answered, "Look, you will die because of the woman you brought into your house last night, for she is a married woman, the wife of Abraham. Now return this man's wife to him, for she is his wife. If you do not return her, know that you will surely die, you and all who belong to you." That night there was a great outcry throughout the land of the Philistines. The people saw a figure with a drawn sword striking down the inhabitants, and continued to do so. The angel of Yahuwah struck the entire land of the Philistines that night, bringing great confusion. By morning every womb was closed and no one could give birth, for Yahuwah's hand was upon them because of Sarah, Abraham's wife, whom Abimelech had taken. In the morning, Abimelech rose with terror, confusion, and great dread. He called his servants and told them his dream, and the people were deeply afraid. One of the king's servants said, "O king, return this woman to her husband, for he is her husband." This same thing happened to the king of Egypt when this man came there. He said of his wife, "She is my sister," for this is what he does when he comes to live in a foreign land. Pharaoh had taken her, but Yahuwah brought grievous plagues upon him until he returned her to her husband. So now, O king, consider what happened last night to the entire land. We know it was because of the woman you took. Return her to her husband, or we may suffer as Pharaoh and his people did. Abimelech quickly called for Sarah and Abraham, and when they stood before him, he asked, "What is this you have done by saying you are brother and sister? I took this woman as my wife." Abraham replied, "I thought I would be killed because of my wife." Abimelech then gave flocks, herds, servants, and 1,000 pieces of silver to Abraham, and returned Sarah to him. Abimelech said, "Look, the entire land is before you. Live wherever you choose." Abraham and Sarah left the king's presence with honor and respect, and continued to dwell in the land, specifically in Gerar. Yet the people of the land and Abimelech's servants continued to suffer from the plague that the angel had inflicted upon them on account of Sarah. Finally, Abimelech sent word to Abraham, asking, "Pray now for your servants to Yahuwah, that he may remove this death from us." Abraham prayed on behalf of Abimelech and his people, and Yahuwah heard his prayer, healing Abimelech and all his subjects. Jasher, chapter 21. At the end of a year and 4 months of Abraham living in the land of the Philistines in Gerar, Yahuwah visited Sarah, and the Elohim remembered her, and she conceived and gave birth to a son for Abraham. Abraham named the son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as Yahuwah had commanded Abraham to do with his descendants after him. Abraham was 100 years old, and Sarah was 90 years old when Isaac was born to them. The child grew up and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Shem and Eber and all the great people of the land, along with Abimelech king of the Philistines, his servants, and Phicol, the captain of his army, came to eat, drink, and celebrate. At the feast Abraham made for his son Isaac's weaning day. Terah, Abraham's father, and Nahor his brother, also came from Haran with all who belonged to them, as they greatly rejoiced upon hearing that a son had been born to Sarah. They came to Abraham, and they ate and drank at the feast Abraham made for Isaac's weaning day. Terah and Nahor celebrated with Abraham, and they stayed with him many days in the land of the Philistines. At that time Serug the son of Roy died in the first year of Isaac's birth, Abraham's son. Serug lived for 239 years before he died. Ishmael, Abraham's son, had grown up by this time. He was 14 years old when Sarah bore Isaac to Abraham. Yahuwah was with Ishmael, Abraham's son, and he grew up and learned to use the bow, becoming an archer. When Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. Ishmael came to Isaac and sat opposite him, then took the bow, drew it, and placed an arrow in it, intending to kill Isaac. Sarah saw what Ishmael intended to do to her son Isaac, and it grieved her deeply. She sent for Abraham and said to him, "Send away this slave woman and her son, for her son will not be heir with my son, as he tried to do this to him today." Abraham listened to Sarah's voice and rose early in the morning. He took 12 loaves and a bottle of water, gave them to Hagar, and sent her away with her son. Hagar went with her son to the wilderness, and they lived in the wilderness of Paran with its inhabitants. Ishmael was an archer, and lived in the wilderness for a long time. Later, he and his mother went to Egypt and lived there. Hagar took a wife for her son from Egypt named Meribah. Ishmael's wife conceived and bore 4 sons and 2 daughters. Afterward, Ishmael, his mother, his wife, and children returned to the wilderness. They made tents in the wilderness where they lived, traveling and resting monthly and yearly. Yahuwah gave Ishmael flocks, herds, and tents because of Abraham his father, and he increased in cattle. Ishmael lived in deserts and tents, traveling and resting for a long time, and did not see his father's face. After some time, Abraham said to his wife Sarah, "I will go see my son Ishmael, for I want to see him, as I haven't seen him for a long time." Abraham rode one of his camels to the wilderness to find his son Ishmael, having heard he was living in a tent in the wilderness with all his belongings. Abraham reached Ishmael's tent around noon and asked after him. He found Ishmael's wife sitting in the tent with her children, but Ishmael and his mother were not there. Abraham asked Ishmael's wife, "Where has Ishmael gone?" She said, "He has gone to hunt in the field." Abraham remained mounted on his camel, as he had sworn to his wife Sarah that he would not dismount. Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, "Give me a little water to drink, as I am tired from the journey." Ishmael's wife answered, "We have neither water nor bread," and continued sitting in the tent, ignoring Abraham and not asking who he was. She was beating her children in the tent and cursing them. She also cursed her husband Ishmael and criticized him. Abraham heard what Ishmael's wife said to her children, and he became very angry and displeased. Abraham called the woman to come out to him from the tent, and she came and stood opposite him, as Abraham remained on his camel. Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, "When your husband Ishmael returns home, tell him these words. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came here looking for you, and this was his appearance and manner. I didn't ask who he was, and since you weren't here, he told me to tell you. When you come home, remove this tent peg you have placed here, and put another peg in its place." Abraham finished instructing the woman and turned to ride his camel home. Later, when Ishmael returned from hunting with his mother, his wife told him these words, "A very old man from the land of the Philistines came looking for you, and this was his appearance and manner. I didn't ask who he was, and since you weren't home, he said to tell you, remove the tent peg you have placed here, and put another peg in its place." Ishmael heard his wife's words and knew it was his father, and that his wife had not shown him honor. Ishmael understood his father's message and listened to him, so he sent the woman away. Ishmael then went to the land of Canaan, took another wife, and brought her to his tent where he lived. 3 years later, Abraham said, "I will go see my son Ishmael again, for I haven't seen him in a long time." He rode his camel to the wilderness and reached Ishmael's tent around noon. He asked after Ishmael, and his wife came out of the tent and said, "He isn't here, sir, for he has gone to hunt in the fields and feed the camels." She said to Abraham, "Please come into the tent and eat some bread, for you must be tired from your journey." Abraham said, "I won't stop as I'm in a hurry to continue my journey, but give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty." The woman quickly ran into the tent and brought out water and bread for Abraham. She placed it before him and encouraged him to eat. He ate and drank, his heart was comforted, and he blessed his son Ishmael. After finishing his meal, he blessed the Elohim and said to Ishmael's wife, "When Ishmael comes home, tell him these words. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came here and asked after you, but you weren't here. I brought him bread and water, and he ate and drank and was comforted. He told me to tell you, the tent peg you have is very good. Don't remove it from the tent." Abraham finished giving his message to the woman and rode home to the land of the Philistines. When Ishmael came to his tent, his wife went out to meet him with joy and a happy heart. She said to him, "An old man came here from the land of the Philistines, and this was his appearance. He asked after you, but you weren't here, so I brought out bread and water, and he ate and drank and was comforted. He told me to tell you, the tent peg you have is very good. Don't remove it from the tent." Ishmael knew it was his father, and that his wife had honored him, and the Elohim blessed Ishmael. Jasher, chapter 22. Ishmael then gathered his wife, children, cattle, and all his belongings, and journeyed to his father in the land of the Philistines. Abraham told Ishmael his son about what had happened with Ishmael's first wife, and what she had done. Ishmael and his children lived with Abraham for many days in that land, and Abraham lived in the land of the Philistines for a long time. 26 years passed, after which Abraham, his servants, and all who belonged to him left the land of the Philistines and moved a great distance away. They came near to Hebron and settled there. Abraham's servants dug water wells, and Abraham and all his household lived by the water. The servants of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, heard that Abraham's servants had dug wells in the borders of the land. They came and argued with Abraham's servants and took from them the great well they had dug. When Abimelech, king of the Philistines, heard of this matter, he came to Abraham with Phicol, his army captain, and 20 of his men. Abimelech spoke to Abraham about his servants, and Abraham complained to Abimelech about the well his servants had taken. Abimelech said to Abraham, "As the Elohim lives, who created the whole earth, I did not hear about what my servants did to your servants until today." Abraham took 7 ewe lambs and gave them to Abimelech, saying, "Please take these from my hands as evidence that I dug this well." Abimelech accepted the 7 ewe lambs Abraham gave him, as Abraham had also given him cattle and herds in abundance. Abimelech swore to Abraham regarding the well, so they named that well Beersheba, because they both swore an oath concerning it. They made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech left with Phicol, his army captain, and all his men, returning to the land of the Philistines. Abraham and his household lived in Beersheba for a long time. Abraham planted a large grove in Beersheba, with 4 gates facing the 4 directions of the earth. He planted a vineyard in it, so that when travelers came to Abraham, they could enter through whichever gate was on their path, stay there, eat and drink until satisfied, and then continue their journey. Abraham's house was always open to people who passed by, who came daily to eat and drink. When anyone who was hungry came to Abraham's house, he would give them bread to eat and drink until they were satisfied. If anyone came naked to his house, he would give them clothes as they needed, along with silver and gold, and teach them about the Elohim who had created them on earth. Abraham did this throughout his life. Abraham, his children, and all his household lived in Beersheba, and he set up his tent as far as Hebron. Abraham's brother Nahor, their father, and their households remained in Haran, as they had not come with Abraham to Canaan. Children were born to Nahor through Milcah, daughter of Haran and sister to Sarah, Abraham's wife. These are their names: Uz, Buz, Kemuel, Kesed, Chazo, Pildash, Tidlaph, and Bethuel, 8 sons in total. These were Milcah's children with Nahor, Abraham's brother. Nahor also had a concubine named Roma, who bore him 4 sons, Zebach, Gachash, Tachash, and Marcha. Nahor had 12 sons in total, not counting his daughters, and they too had children in Haran. The children of Uz, Nahor's firstborn, were Abi, Chereph, Gadin, Melus, and their sister Deborah. Buz's sons were Berachel, Namath, Sheva, and Madonu. Kemuel's sons were Aram and Rechob. Kesed's sons were Anamlech, Meshai, Benon, and Yiphi. Chazo's sons were Pildash, Mechi, and Ophir. Pildash's sons were Arud, Chamum, Mered, and Moloch. Tidlaph's sons were Mushan, Cushan, and Mutzi. Bethuel's children were Sechar, Laban, and their sister Rebekah. These are the families of Nahor's children born in Haran. Aram, son of Kemuel, and his brother Rechob left Haran and found a valley by the Euphrates River. They built a city there and named it after Pethor, Aram's son, calling it Aram Naharaim to this day. Kesed's children also went to find a place to live and found a valley opposite the land of Shinar, where they settled. They built a city there and named it Kesed after their father. It is called the land of Kasdim to this day, where the Kasdim people lived and multiplied greatly. Terah, father of Nahor and Abraham, took another wife in his old age named Pelilah. She had a son whom he named Zoba. Terah lived 25 years after Zoba's birth. Terah died that year, in the 35th year after Isaac's birth. Terah lived for 205 years and was buried in Haran. Zoba, Terah's son, lived 30 years and had 3 sons, Aram, Achlis, and Merich. Aram, son of Zoba, son of Terah, had 3 wives and fathered 12 sons and 3 daughters. The Elohim gave Aram great wealth, possessions, and abundant cattle, flocks, and herds. Aram and his household left Haran to find a new place to live, as their property had grown too great to stay in Haran with their relatives, Nahor's children. Aram went with his brothers and found a valley in the eastern country where they settled. They built a city and named it Aram after their eldest brother. It is called Aram Zoba to this day. During this time, Isaac, Abraham's son, was growing up, and his father Abraham taught him about the ways of the Elohim, and the Elohim was with him. When Isaac was 37, his brother Ishmael was staying with him in the tent. Ishmael boasted to Isaac, saying, "I was 13 when the Elohim told our father to circumcise us, and I obeyed the Elohim's command to our father. I gave myself to the Elohim and did not disobey his command." Isaac replied to Ishmael, "Why do you boast about this small piece of flesh you removed from your body, which the Elohim commanded you to do? As the Elohim lives, the Yahuwah of my father Abraham, if the Elohim should tell my father, 'Take your son Isaac and offer him as a sacrifice before me,' I would not resist, but would gladly agree." The Elohim heard Isaac's words to Ishmael and was pleased, and decided to test Abraham in this matter. The day came when the sons of Yahuwah came before the Elohim, and Satan came with them. The Elohim asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered, "From roaming the earth, going back and forth across it." The Elohim asked Satan, "What do you say about the people of earth?" Satan replied, "I have seen all those who serve you and remember you when they need something from you. When you give them what they ask for, they become complacent, forget you, and no longer remember you. Have you seen Abraham, son of Terah, who had no children at first? He served you and built altars wherever he went, made offerings on them, and constantly proclaimed your name to everyone. But now that his son Isaac is born, he has forgotten you. He made a great feast for everyone in the land and has forgotten the Elohim. Among all he has done, he brought you no offerings, no burnt offerings, peace offerings, ox, lamb, or goat from all he killed on his son's weaning day. From his son's birth until now, 37 years, he hasn't built an altar or brought offerings to you. He saw that you gave him what he asked for, so he abandoned you." The Elohim said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Abraham? There is no one like him on earth, a perfect and upright man who fears Yahuwah and avoids evil. As I live, if I were to ask him to bring his son Isaac before me, he would not refuse, much less if I asked for a burnt offering from his flocks or herds." Satan answered the Elohim, "Test Abraham as you have said, and you will see if he doesn't disobey and reject your words today." Jasher, chapter 23. At that time the word of the Elohim came to Abraham, and he said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." And he said to him, "Take your son now, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which will be shown to you, for there you will see a cloud and the glory of the Elohim." Abraham said to himself, "How will I separate my son Isaac from Sarah his mother, to bring him up as a burnt offering before the Elohim?" Abraham came into the tent and sat before Sarah his wife, and spoke these words to her, "My son Isaac has grown up and hasn't studied the service of his Yahuwah for some time. Tomorrow I will take him to Shem and Eber his son. There he will learn the ways of the Elohim, for they will teach him to know the Elohim, and to know that when he prays continually before the Elohim, he will answer him. There he will learn the way of serving the Elohim his Yahuwah." Sarah said, "You have spoken well. Isaac, go, my lord, and do as you have said, but don't take him too far from me, nor let him stay there too long, for my soul is bound within his soul." Abraham said to Sarah, "My daughter, let us pray to the Elohim our Yahuwah that he may do good with us." Sarah took her son Isaac, and he stayed with her all that night. She kissed and embraced him, and gave him instructions until morning. She said to him, "O my son, how can my soul separate itself from you?" She continued kissing and embracing him, and gave Abraham instructions concerning him. Sarah said to Abraham, "O my lord, I beg you to take care of your son and keep your eyes on him, for I have no other son or daughter but him. Don't abandon him. If he is hungry, give him bread, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. Don't let him walk on foot, nor let him sit in the sun. Don't let him go by himself on the road, nor force him against his wishes, but do whatever he asks of you." Sarah wept bitterly all night because of Isaac, and gave him instructions until morning. In the morning, Sarah selected a very fine and beautiful garment from those garments she had in the house, which Abimelech had given to her. She dressed Isaac her son in it, and put a turban on his head, with a precious stone enclosed in the top of the turban. She gave them provisions for the road, and they set out. Isaac went with his father Abraham, and some of their servants accompanied them to see them off. Sarah went out with them, and accompanied them on the road to see them off, and they said to her, "Return to the tent." When Sarah heard the words of her son Isaac, she wept bitterly, and Abraham her husband wept with her, and their son wept with them greatly. Those who went with them also wept greatly. Sarah grabbed hold of her son Isaac, held him in her arms, and embraced him while continuing to weep with him. Sarah said, "Who knows if after today I will ever see you again?" They all continued weeping together. Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, and all those who accompanied them on the road wept with them. Sarah then turned away from her son, weeping bitterly, and all her male and female servants returned with her to the tent. Abraham went with Isaac his son to offer him as an offering before the Elohim, as he had commanded him. Abraham took 2 of his young men with him, Ishmael the son of Hagar and Eliezer his servant. They went together, and while they were walking on the road, the young men spoke these words to themselves. Ishmael said to Eliezer, "Now my father Abraham is going with Isaac to offer him as a burnt offering to the Elohim, as he commanded him. When he returns, he will give me everything he possesses to inherit after him, for I am his firstborn." Eliezer answered Ishmael, saying, "Surely Abraham already cast you away with your mother, and swore that you would not inherit anything he possesses. To whom will he give all that he has with all his treasures, but to me his servant, who has been faithful in his house, who has served him night and day and has done all that he desired of me? To me he will leave everything when he dies." While Abraham was walking with his son Isaac along the road, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the form of a very old man, humble and with a contrite spirit. He approached Abraham and said, Are you foolish or brutal that you would do this thing today to your only son? For Yahuwah gave you a son in your later days, in your old age, and will you go and kill him today when he has committed no wrong? Will you cause your only son's soul to perish from the earth? Don't you know and understand that this cannot be from the Elohim? For the Elohim cannot do such evil to man on earth, to tell him, go kill your child. Abraham heard this, and knew it was Satan's word trying to lead him away from the way of the Elohim. But Abraham would not listen to Satan's voice, and Abraham rebuked him until he left. Satan returned and came to Isaac, appearing to him as a handsome and attractive young man. He approached Isaac and said, Don't you know and understand that your old foolish father is taking you to be killed today for no reason? Now therefore, my son, don't listen or pay attention to him, for he is a foolish old man. Don't let your precious soul and beautiful form be lost from the earth. Isaac heard this and said to Abraham, Father, did you hear what this man has said? This is what he spoke. Abraham answered his son Isaac, saying, Be careful of him and don't listen to his words or pay attention to him, for he is Satan, trying to turn us away today from Yahuwah's commands. Abraham continued rebuking Satan, and Satan left them. Seeing he couldn't prevail over them, he hid himself and went ahead of them on the road. He transformed himself into a large brook of water on the road, and when Abraham, Isaac, and his 2 young men reached that place, they saw a large and powerful brook like mighty waters. They entered the brook and crossed through it, and at first the waters reached their legs. They went deeper into the brook, and the waters reached up to their necks. They were all terrified because of the water. While they were crossing the brook, Abraham recognized that place and knew there had been no water there before. Abraham said to his son Isaac, I know this place where there was no brook or water before. This is Satan doing all this to us, trying to turn us away today from Yahuwah's commands. Abraham rebuked him, saying, The Elohim rebuke you, O Satan. Leave us alone, for we go by Yahuwah's commands. Satan was terrified at Abraham's voice and went away from them, and the place became dry land again as it was before. Abraham went with Isaac toward the place that Yahuwah had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance that Yahuwah had told him of. A pillar of fire appeared to him that reached from earth to heaven, and a cloud of glory was upon the mountain, and the glory of the Elohim was seen in the cloud. Abraham said to Isaac, My son, do you see what I see on that mountain in the distance? Isaac answered his father, I see a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of the Elohim is seen upon the cloud. Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Elohim as a burnt offering. Abraham said to Eliezer and Ishmael his son, Do you also see what we see upon the mountain in the distance? They answered, We see nothing more than what appears on other mountains of the earth. And Abraham knew they were not accepted before the Elohim to go with them, so Abraham said to them, Stay here with the donkey, while my son Isaac and I go to that mountain to worship before the Elohim, and then return to you. Eliezer and Ishmael remained in that place, as Abraham had commanded. Abraham took wood for a burnt offering, and placed it on his son Isaac, and he took the fire and the knife, and they both went to that place. As they were walking, Isaac said to his father, I see the fire and wood here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering before the Elohim? Abraham answered his son Isaac, saying, The Elohim has chosen you, my son, to be a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb. Isaac said to his father, I will do all that the Elohim spoke to you with joy and cheerfulness of heart. Abraham again said to Isaac his son, Is there any thought or concern in your heart about this that isn't proper? Tell me, my son. I beg you, don't hide it from me. Isaac answered his father Abraham, saying, As the Elohim lives and as your soul lives, there is nothing in my heart that would make me deviate either right or left from the word he has spoken to you. Not a limb or muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there any evil thought or concern in my heart about this. But I am joyful and cheerful in this matter, and I say, Blessed is the Elohim who has chosen me today to be a burnt offering before him. Abraham greatly rejoiced at Isaac's words, and they went on and came together to the place that the Elohim had spoken of. Abraham began to build the altar in that place, and Abraham was weeping, while Isaac took stones and mortar until they finished building the altar. Abraham took the wood and arranged it on the altar they had built. He took his son Isaac and bound him to place him on the wood that was on the altar, to kill him as a burnt offering before the Elohim. Isaac said to his father, "Bind me securely and place me on the altar, so I don't turn and move and break free from the force of the knife on my flesh, and thereby profane the burnt offering." And Abraham did so. Isaac still said to his father, "My father, when you have killed me and burnt me as an offering, take what remains of my ashes to bring to Sarah my mother, and say to her, 'This is the sweet-smelling savor of Isaac.' But don't tell her this if she is sitting near a well or on any high place, in case she throws herself down after me and dies." Abraham heard Isaac's words and raised his voice, and wept when Isaac spoke these words. Abraham's tears fell upon Isaac his son, and Isaac wept bitterly, saying to his father, "Hurry, my father, and do with me the will of the Elohim our Yahuwah, as he has commanded you." The hearts of Abraham and Isaac rejoiced at this thing which the Elohim had commanded them, but their eyes wept bitterly while their hearts rejoiced. Abraham bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar upon the wood, and Isaac stretched out his neck upon the altar before his father, and Abraham stretched out his hand to take the knife to kill his son as a burnt offering before the Elohim. At that time the angels of mercy came before the Elohim and spoke to him concerning Isaac, saying, "O Elohim, you are a merciful and compassionate king over all that you have created in heaven and earth, and you support them all. Give therefore ransom and redemption instead of your servant Isaac, and have pity and compassion upon Abraham and Isaac his son, who are today performing your commands. Have you seen, O Elohim, how Isaac the son of Abraham your servant is bound for slaughter like an animal? Now therefore let your pity be stirred for them, O Elohim." At that time the Elohim appeared to Abraham and called to him from heaven, saying, "Don't lay your hand upon the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear Yahuwah in performing this act, and in not withholding your son, your only son, from me." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. This was the ram which the Elohim Yahuwah had created on earth, on the day he made earth and heaven. For the Elohim had prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac. This ram was approaching Abraham when Satan caught hold of him and entangled his horns in the thicket, so he couldn't advance to Abraham, trying to prevent Abraham from sacrificing him instead of his son. When Abraham saw the ram approaching and Satan holding him back, he went and brought him before the altar. He untied his son Isaac and put the ram in his place, and Abraham killed the ram upon the altar and offered it in place of his son Isaac. Abraham sprinkled some of the ram's blood upon the altar and proclaimed, "This is in place of my son, and may this be considered today as the blood of my son before the Elohim." Everything Abraham did on this occasion by the altar, he would proclaim, "This is in place of my son, and may it be considered today before the Elohim in place of my son." Abraham completed the entire service by the altar, and the service was accepted before the Elohim and was counted as if it had been Isaac. The Elohim blessed Abraham and his descendants that day. Satan went to Sarah and appeared to her as a very humble and meek old man, while Abraham was still engaged in the burnt offering before the Elohim. He said to her, "Don't you know what Abraham has done with your only son today? He took Isaac and built an altar, killed him, and offered him as a sacrifice upon the altar." Isaac cried and wept before his father, but Abraham didn't look at him or have compassion for him. Satan repeated these words and left her. Sarah heard all Satan's words and believed him to be an old man from among the people who had been with her son and had come to tell her these things. Sarah raised her voice, wept, and cried out bitterly for her son. She threw herself on the ground and put dust on her head, saying, "O my son, Isaac, my son, if only I had died today instead of you." She continued weeping and said, "I grieve for you, O my son Isaac, if only I had died today in your place." She kept weeping and said, I grieve for you after raising you and bringing you up. Now my joy has turned to mourning over you. I longed for you and cried and prayed to Yahuwah until I bore you at 90 years old, and now today you have been given to the knife and the fire, to be made an offering. But I console myself about you, my son, because this was the word of the Elohim, and you performed the command of your Yahuwah. For who can disobey the word of our Yahuwah, in whose hands is the soul of every living creature? You are just, O Elohim, our Yahuwah, for all your works are good and righteous. I also rejoice in your word which you commanded, and while my eyes weep bitterly, my heart rejoices. Sarah laid her head on one of her maidservants' chest, and became as still as a stone. She later got up and went around making inquiries until she came to Hebron, asking everyone she met on the road, but no one could tell her what had happened to her son. She came with her male and female servants to Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron, and asked about her son. She stayed there while sending some of her servants to find where Abraham had gone with Isaac. They went to look for him in the house of Shem and Eber, but couldn't find him. They searched throughout the land, but he wasn't there. Then Satan came to Sarah in the form of an old man. He stood before her and said, I spoke falsely to you, for Abraham did not kill his son, and he is not dead. When she heard these words, her joy was so violently extreme about her son that her soul departed through joy. She died and was gathered to her people. When Abraham had finished his service, he returned with his son Isaac to his young men, and they got up and went together to Beersheba, and they came home. Abraham looked for Sarah but couldn't find her. He asked about her, and they told him, She went as far as Hebron to look for both of you, for that's what she was told. Abraham and Isaac went to her in Hebron, and when they found that she was dead, they raised their voices and wept bitterly over her. Isaac fell upon his mother's face and wept over her, saying, O my mother, how have you left me, and where have you gone? Oh, how have you left me? Abraham and Isaac wept greatly, and all their servants wept with them because of Sarah, and they mourned over her with great and heavy mourning. Jasher. Chapter 24. Sarah lived for 127 years, and then Sarah died. Abraham rose up from before his dead to find a burial place to bury his wife Sarah. He went and spoke to the children of Heth, the inhabitants of the land, saying, I am a stranger and a foreigner among you in your land. Give me a burial place in your land, so I may bury my dead from before me. The children of Heth said to Abraham, Look, the land is before you. Bury your dead in the best of our burial places, for no one will keep you from burying your dead. Abraham said to them, If you agree to this, please speak to Ephron, the son of Zochar, asking if he will give me the cave of Machpelah, which is at the end of his field. I will purchase it from him for whatever price he wants. Ephron lived among the children of Heth, and they called for him, and he came before Abraham. Ephron said to Abraham, Look, I will do all you ask, my servant. But Abraham said, No, I want to buy the cave and the field you have for its value, so it may be a permanent burial place. Ephron answered, Look, the field and cave are before you. Give whatever you wish. Abraham said, I will only buy it for full value from your hand, from those who go in at the gate of your city, and from your descendants forever. Ephron and all his brothers heard this, and Abraham weighed out 400 shekels of silver to Ephron, in the presence of Ephron and all his brothers. Abraham wrote down this transaction, and had it witnessed by 4 people. These are the names of the witnesses: Amigal son of Abishna the Hittite, Adikaram son of Ashunach the Hivite, Abdon son of Achiram the Gomerite, and Bakdil son of Abudish the Zidonite. Abraham took the purchase document and stored it in his treasures. These are the words Abraham wrote in the document, that Abraham bought the cave and field from Ephron the Hittite, his descendants, those who go out of his city, and their descendants forever, as a purchase for Abraham, his descendants, and those who come from his line, as a permanent burial place. He sealed it and had it witnessed. The field, the cave within it, and all that place were secured to Abraham and his descendants after him, from the children of Heth. It is in front of Mamre in Hebron, in the land of Canaan. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah there, and that place and all its boundaries became Abraham's and his descendants' possession as a burial place. Abraham buried Sarah with the ceremony given to kings, and she was buried in very fine and beautiful garments. At her funeral were Shem, his sons Eber and Abimelech, along with Anar, Ashkol and Mamre, and all the nobles of the land followed her funeral procession. Sarah lived for 127 years before she died, and Abraham held a great and heavy mourning, observing the mourning rites for 7 days. All the inhabitants of the land comforted Abraham and Isaac his son because of Sarah. When their mourning period ended, Abraham sent his son Isaac away, and he went to the house of Shem and Eber to learn the ways of the Elohim and his teachings. Abraham stayed there 3 years. At that time Abraham got up with all his servants, and they returned home to Beersheba, where Abraham and all his servants stayed. At the turn of the year, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, died. He was 193 years old when he died. Abraham went with his people to the land of the Philistines, and they comforted the entire household and all his servants. Then he returned home. After Abimelech's death, the people of Gerar took his son Ben-Malich, who was only 12 years old, and made him king in his father's place. They named him Abimelech after his father, as was their custom in Gerar. Abimelech ruled in place of Abimelech his father, and sat on his throne. Lot, the son of Haran, also died during this time, in the 39th year of Isaac's life. Lot lived for 140 years before he died. These are Lot's children, born to him by his daughters. The firstborn was named Moab, and the second was named Ben-Ammi. Lot's 2 sons took wives from the land of Canaan, and they had children. Moab's children were Ed, Maon, Tarsus, and Canville, 4 sons. These are the ancestors of the Moabites to this day. All the families of Lot's children went to live wherever they found suitable land, for they were fruitful and increased greatly. They built cities in the land where they lived, and named the cities they built after themselves. Nahor, son of Terah and brother to Abraham, died during this time in the 40th year of Isaac's life. Nahor lived for 172 years before he died, and was buried in Haran. When Abraham heard his brother had died, he grieved deeply and mourned for his brother many days. Abraham called for Eliezer, his head servant, to give him instructions about his household, and he came and stood before him. Abraham said to him, "Look, I am old and don't know when I will die, for I am advanced in years. Therefore go now and don't take a wife for my son from this place and land, from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom we live. Instead, go to my homeland and birthplace, and take a wife for my son from there. The Elohim Yahweh of heaven and earth, who took me from my father's house and brought me to this place, and who said to me, 'I will give this land to your descendants as a permanent inheritance,' will send his angel ahead of you and make your journey successful, so you may get a wife for my son from my family and my father's house." The servant answered his master Abraham, "Look, I will go to your birthplace and your father's house to take a wife for your son from there. But if the woman isn't willing to follow me to this land, should I take your son back to the land of your birth?" Abraham said to him, "Make sure you don't take my son back there. The Elohim before whom I have walked will send his angel ahead of you and make your journey successful." Eliezer did as Abraham ordered, and swore to Abraham his master about this matter. Eliezer took 10 of his master's camels and 10 of his master's servants with him. They set out for Haran, the city of Abraham and Nahor, to find a wife for Isaac, Abraham's son. While they were gone, Abraham sent to the house of Shem and Eber, and they brought his son Isaac from there. Isaac returned to his father's house in Beersheba, while Eliezer and his men arrived in Haran. They stopped in the city by the water source, and he made his camels kneel down by the water, and they stayed there. Eliezer, Abraham's servant, prayed, saying, "O Yahuwah of my master Abraham, please give me success today and show kindness to my master by choosing a wife for my master's son from his family today." The Elohim listened to Eliezer's voice, for Abraham his servant's sake, and he met Bethuel's daughter. Bethuel was the son of Milcah, wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, and Eliezer went to their house. Eliezer told them everything about his mission and that he was Abraham's servant, and they were overjoyed. They all blessed the Elohim who had brought this about, and they gave Rebekah, Bethuel's daughter, as a wife for Isaac. The young woman was very beautiful in appearance. She was a virgin, and Rebekah was 10 years old at that time. Bethuel, Laban, and their families held a feast that night, and Eliezer and his men came and ate, drank, and celebrated with them that night. In the morning, Eliezer and his men got up, and he called to Bethuel's entire household, saying, "Send me back to my master." They got up and sent Rebekah and her nurse Deborah, daughter of Uz, with them. They gave her silver and gold, male and female servants, and blessed her. They sent Eliezer away with his men. The servants took Rebekah, and he returned to his master in the land of Canaan. Isaac took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he brought her into the tent. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of his uncle Bethuel at Jasher. Chapter 25. At that time Abraham took another wife in his old age, named Keturah, from the land of Canaan. She bore him 6 sons, Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuach. The children of Zimran were Abihen, Moloch, and Narim. Jokshan's sons were Sheba and Dedan, and Medan's sons were Amida, Joab, Gochi, Elisha, and Nothak. Midian's sons were Epher, Chanok, Abida, and Eldar. The sons of Ishbak were Machiro, Beodua, and Tator. The sons of Shuach were Bildad, Mamdad, Munan, and Meban. All these are the families of the children of Keturah the Canaanite woman, who bore them to Abraham the Hebrew. Abraham sent all these away with gifts, and they went away from his son Isaac to live wherever they could find a place. They all went to the mountain in the east and built themselves 6 cities where they lived until this day. But Sheba and Dedan's children, who were Jokshan's children, didn't live with their brothers in their cities. Instead, they traveled and camped in various countries and wilderness areas until this day. The children of Midian, Abraham's son, went to the east of the land of Cush. There they found a large valley in the eastern country. They stayed there and built a city, and they lived there. This is the land of Midian until this day. Midian lived in the city he built, along with his 5 sons and all who belonged to him. These are the names of Midian's sons according to their names in their cities: Epher, Chanok, Abida, and Eldar. Epher's sons were Methach, Mesher, Avi, and Zanua. Epher's sons were Ephron, Zur, Alirun, and Medin. Chanok's sons were Reuel, Rechem, Azi, Alyoshub, and Alad. Abida's sons were Chur, Melud, Keruri, and Molchi. Eldar's sons were Micah, Reba, Malchiah, and Gabal. These are the names of the Midianites according to their families. Afterward, the families of Midian spread throughout the land of Midian. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. Ishmael took a wife from Egypt named Reba, who is also called Meribah. Reba bore Ishmael Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, and their sister Bosmath. Ishmael sent away his wife Reba, and she returned to Egypt to her father's house and lived there, for she had been very wicked in Ishmael's eyes and in Abraham his father's eyes. Later, Ishmael took a wife from Canaan named Malchuth, and she bore him Nishma, Duma, Massa, Chadad, Tema, Yetur, Naphish, and Kedma. These are Ishmael's sons and their names, 12 princes according to their nations. The families of Ishmael later spread out, and Ishmael took his children and all the property he had gained, along with the members of his household and all that belonged to him, and they went to find a place to live. They went to live near the wilderness of Paran, and their dwelling was from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt as you go toward Assyria. Ishmael and his sons lived in the land, had children, and were fruitful and increased greatly. These are the names of the sons of Nebaioth, Ishmael's firstborn: Mend, Send, and Maon. Kedar's sons were Alion, Kezem, Chamad, and Eli. Adbeel's sons were Chamad and Jabin. Mibsam's sons were Obadiah, Ebedmelech, and Yush. These are the families of the children of Reba, Ishmael's wife. Mishma's sons, Ishmael's son, were Shemua, Zecharion, and Obed. Duma's sons were Kezed, Eli, Machmad, and Ahmed. Masa's sons were Melon, Mula, and Ebidadon. Chadad's sons were Azur, Minzar, and Ebedmelech. Tamar's sons were Seir, Sadon, and Yakol. Yetur's sons were Merith, Yaish, Alio, and Pachoth. Naphish's sons were Ebed-Tamd, Abiasaph, and Mir. Kedma's sons were Kalip, Tachti, and Omir. These were the children of Malchuth, Ishmael's wife according to their families. All these are Ishmael's families according to their generations, and they lived in the lands where they had built their cities until this day. Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, and wife of Abraham's son Isaac, was barren in those days and had no children. Isaac lived with his father in the land of Canaan, and the Elohim was with Isaac. During this time Arpachshad, son of Shem, son of Noah, died in the 48th year of Isaac's life. Arpachshad lived for 438 years before he died. Chapter 26. In the 59th year of Isaac's life, the son of Abraham, Rebekah his wife was still barren. Rebekah said to Isaac, "I have heard, my lord, that your mother Sarah was barren until my Elohim, Abraham your father, prayed for her and she conceived by him. Now therefore stand up and pray to Yahweh, and he will hear your prayer and remember us through his mercies." Isaac answered his wife Rebekah, saying, "Abraham has already prayed to Yahweh to multiply his descendants, so this barrenness must come from you." Rebekah said to him, "But get up now and pray, so the Elohim may hear your prayer and grant me children." Isaac listened to his wife's words. Isaac and his wife went to the land of Moriah to pray and seek the Elohim. When they reached that place, Isaac stood up and prayed to the Elohim about his wife's barrenness. Isaac said, "O Elohim, Yahuwah, of heaven and earth, whose goodness and mercies fill the earth, you who took my father from his father's house and birthplace and brought him to this land, and said to him, 'I will give this land to your descendants,' and promised him, saying, 'I will multiply your descendants like the stars of heaven and the sand of the sea.' Now may your words to my father be fulfilled. For you are the Elohim our Yahuwah. Our eyes look to you to give us children, as you promised us. For you are the Elohim our Yahuwah, and our eyes are directed only to you." The Elohim heard Isaac's prayer, Abraham's son, and the Elohim responded to him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. About 7 months later the children struggled within her, causing her such pain that she was distressed because of them. She asked all the women then in the land, "Has anything like this happened to you?" And they said, "No." She said to them, "Why am I alone in this among all women on earth?" She went to the land of Moriah to seek the Elohim about this. She went to Shem and his son Eber to ask them about this matter, so they could seek the Elohim's guidance. She also asked Abraham to seek and ask the Elohim about all that had happened to her. They all inquired of the Elohim about this matter, and they brought her word from the Elohim, saying, "2 children are in your womb, and 2 nations will rise from them. One nation will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When her time to give birth was complete, she knelt down, and there were twins in her womb, as the Elohim had told her. The first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and everyone called him Esau, saying that he was fully formed from the womb. Then his brother came out, his hand holding Esau's heel, so they called him Jacob. Isaac, Abraham's son, was 60 years old when they were born. The boys grew to their 15th year and began mixing in society. Esau was cunning and deceitful, skilled at hunting in the field. Jacob was perfect and wise, living in tents, tending flocks and learning the Elohim's instructions and his parents' commands. Isaac and his household lived with his father Abraham in Canaan, as Yahuwah had commanded them. Ishmael, Abraham's son, went with his children and all who belonged to them back to the land of Havilah, where they lived. All the children of Abraham's concubines went to live in the eastern lands, for Abraham had sent them away from his son with gifts. Abraham gave everything he had to his son Isaac, including all his treasures. He commanded him, saying, "Don't you know and understand the Elohim is Yahuwah in heaven and earth, and there is no other besides him? He took me from my father's house and birthplace, and gave me all earth's delights, who saved me from the wicked's counsel, for I trusted in him. He brought me here and rescued me from Ur-Kasdim, saying to me, 'I will give all these lands to your descendants, and they will inherit them when they keep my commandments, statutes and judgments, that I have commanded you and will command them.' Now therefore, my son, listen to me and keep the commandments of the Elohim your Yahuwah, which I commanded you. Don't turn from the right way to either side, so it may go well with you and your children forever." Remember the wonderful works of the Elohim and his kindness toward us, delivering us from our enemies' hands. The Elohim, our Yahuwah, made them fall to us. Now therefore keep all I have commanded you. Don't turn from your Yahuwah's commandments, and serve no one else, so it may go well with you and your descendants. Teach your children and descendants the Elohim's instructions and commandments. Show them the right way to live, so it may go well with them forever. Isaac answered his father, What my Elohim has commanded I will do. I won't depart from the Elohim my Yahuwah's commands. I will keep all he commanded me. Abraham blessed his son Isaac and his children, and taught Jacob the Elohim's instruction and ways. At that time Abraham died. In the 15th year of Jacob and Esau's life, Isaac's sons, Abraham lived 175 years. He died and was gathered to his people in good old age, old and content with life, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him. When the Canaanites heard Abraham had died, they all came with their kings, princes, and people to bury him. All the people of Haran, all Abraham's household families, all the princes and nobles, and Abraham's sons by the concubines came when they heard of his death. They repaid Abraham's kindness, comforted his son Isaac, and buried Abraham in the cave he bought from Ephron the Hittite and his children as a burial place. All the Canaanites and those who had known Abraham mourned for him a whole year, both men and women. All the children and people of the land wept for Abraham because he had been good to them all and had been upright with Yahuwah and people. No one who feared Yahuwah like Abraham had arisen, for he had feared his Yahuwah from youth and served the Elohim, following his ways throughout his life, from childhood until death. The Elohim was with him and saved him from Nimrod and his people's counsel, and when he fought the 4 kings of Elam, he defeated them. He brought all earth's children to serve Yahuwah, taught them the Elohim's ways, and helped them know the Elohim. He planted a grove and vineyard, and always kept food and drink in his tent for travelers, so they could be satisfied in his house. The Elohim Yahuwah blessed the whole earth because of Abraham. After Abraham's death, Yahuwah blessed his son Isaac and his children, and the Elohim was with Isaac as he had been with Abraham his father, for Isaac kept all the Elohim's commandments as Abraham his father had instructed him. He didn't turn right or left from the path his father had shown him. Chapter 27. After Abraham's death, Esau frequently went into the field to hunt. Nimrod, king of Babel, who was also called Amraphel, often went hunting in the field with his mighty men, and would walk with his men in the cool of the day. Nimrod watched Esau constantly, for jealousy against Esau had grown in Nimrod's heart. One day when Esau went to hunt in the field, he found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with 2 of his men. All Nimrod's mighty men and people were with him in the wilderness, but they had spread out far from him, going in different directions to hunt. Esau hid himself from Nimrod, waiting in ambush for him in the wilderness. Nimrod and his men didn't recognize him. Nimrod and his men often walked around in the field in the cool of the day to check where their men were hunting. When Nimrod and his 2 men came to where Esau was, Esau suddenly jumped from his hiding place, drew his sword, rushed at Nimrod, and cut off his head. Esau fought fiercely with Nimrod's 2 men, and when they called out, Esau turned to them and killed them with his sword. All of Nimrod's mighty men who had left him to hunt in the wilderness heard the cry from far away. They recognized the voices of the 2 men and ran to investigate. They found their king and the 2 men lying dead in the wilderness. When Esau saw Nimrod's mighty men approaching from a distance, he fled and escaped. Esau took Nimrod's valuable garments, which Nimrod had inherited from his father and had used to rule over the whole land. He ran and hid them in his house. Esau ran to the city to escape Nimrod's men and came to his father's house, tired and exhausted from the fight. He was near death from distress when he approached his brother Jacob and sat before him. He said to his brother Jacob, "Look, I'm going to die today, so what good is the birthright to me?" Jacob dealt shrewdly with Esau in this matter, and Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, for this was brought about by the Elohim. Esau also sold Jacob his share in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the children of Heth as a burial ground. Jacob bought all this from his brother Esau for fair value. Jacob wrote all this in a document, had it witnessed and sealed it. The document stayed in Jacob's possession. When Nimrod, son of Cush, died, his men carried him in dismay and buried him in his city. Nimrod lived for 215 years before he died. Nimrod reigned over the people of the land for 185 years. He died by Esau's sword in shame and disgrace, and Abraham's descendant caused his death as he had seen in his dream. When Nimrod died, his kingdom split into many divisions. All the regions Nimrod had ruled were returned to their respective kings, who reclaimed them after his death. All the people of Nimrod's house were enslaved to the other kings of the land for a long time. Chapter 28. In those days after Abraham's death, in that year the Elohim brought a severe famine to the land. While the famine was ravaging Canaan, Isaac prepared to go down to Egypt because of the famine, as his father Abraham had done. The Elohim appeared to Isaac that night and said to him, "Don't go down to Egypt, but go to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and stay there until the famine ends." Isaac went to Gerar as the Elohim commanded him, and stayed there a full year. When Isaac came to Gerar, the people saw that his wife Rebekah was beautiful, and they asked Isaac about his wife. He said, "She is my sister," because he was afraid they would kill him for her if they knew she was his wife. Abimelech's princes went and praised the woman to the king, but he didn't respond or pay attention to their words. However, he heard them say that Isaac claimed she was his sister, so the king kept this information to himself. After Isaac had been in the land 3 months, Abimelech looked out his window and saw Isaac being intimate with Rebekah, his wife. Isaac lived in the outer house belonging to the king, opposite the king's house. The king said to Isaac, "What have you done to us by saying she is your sister? One of our important men could easily have slept with her, and you would have brought guilt on us." Isaac said to Abimelech, "I said it because I was afraid I would be killed because of my wife." Then Abimelech ordered all his princes and great men to bring Isaac and Rebekah his wife before the king. The king commanded them to dress Isaac and Rebekah in royal garments and have them ride through the city streets, announcing throughout the land, "This is the man, and this is his wife. Whoever touches this man or his wife will surely die." Isaac returned with his wife to the king's house, and the Elohim was with Isaac as he continued to grow in prosperity and lacked nothing. The Elohim made Isaac find favor with Abimelech and all his subjects. Abimelech treated Isaac well, remembering the oath and covenant between his father and Abraham. Abimelech said to Isaac, "Look, the whole land is before you. Live wherever you like until you return to your land." Abimelech gave Isaac fields and vineyards, and the best part of Gerar's land to plant, harvest, and eat from until the famine ended. Isaac planted in that land and received 100-fold harvest that year, and the Elohim blessed him. He became very wealthy, acquiring flocks, herds, and many servants. When the famine ended, the Elohim appeared to Isaac and said, "Get up, leave this place and return to your land, to Canaan." So Isaac went back to Hebron in Canaan with all his possessions, as the Elohim commanded. After this, Shelach son of Arpachshad died that year, in the 18th year of Jacob and Esau's lives. Shelach lived 433 years before he died. At that time, Isaac sent his younger son Jacob to Shem and Eber's house, where he learned the Elohim's instructions. Jacob stayed with Shem and Eber for 32 years, but his brother Esau wouldn't go, choosing to stay at his father's house in Canaan. Esau spent his days hunting in the fields, bringing home whatever he could catch. Esau was cunning and deceitful, manipulating people's hearts, but he was also a skilled hunter. Eventually he went hunting as usual and traveled as far as the field of Seir, which is Edom. He stayed in Seir hunting for a year and 4 months. There Esau saw a Canaanite woman named Jehudith, daughter of Beeri, son of Epher, from Heth's family, son of Canaan. Esau married her when he was 40 years old. He brought her to Hebron, where his father lived, and settled there. It happened in those days, in Isaac's 110th year, which was Jacob's 50th year, that Shem son of Noah died. Shem was 600 years old when he died. When Shem died, Jacob returned to his father in Hebron in Canaan. In Jacob's 56th year, people came from Haran with news about Rebekah's brother Laban, son of Bethuel. Laban's wife had been barren and had no children, and none of his servants had borne him children either. The Elohim later remembered Adinah, Laban's wife, and she conceived and gave birth to twin daughters. Laban named the older one Leah and the younger Rachel. People brought this news to Rebekah, and she greatly rejoiced that the Elohim had blessed her brother with children. Chapter 29. Isaac, Abraham's son, grew old and advanced in years, and his eyes became heavy with age. They were dim and couldn't see. At that time, Isaac called his son Esau, saying, "Please get your weapons, your quiver and bow. Go into the field and get me some venison. Make me savory meat and bring it to me so I may eat and bless you before I die, as I have become old and gray-headed." Esau did this. He took his weapon and went to hunt venison as usual, to bring to his father as ordered so he might receive his blessing. Rebekah heard everything Isaac said to Esau. She quickly called her son Jacob, saying, "Your father spoke these words to your brother Esau, and I heard them. Now hurry and do what I tell you. Go quickly to the flock and bring me 2 fine young goats. I will prepare the savory meat for your father, and you'll bring it to him to eat before your brother returns from hunting, so your father may bless you." Jacob hurried and did as his mother commanded. He made the savory meat and brought it to his father before Esau returned from hunting. Isaac said to Jacob, "Who are you, my son?" He replied, "I am your firstborn Esau. I've done as you ordered. Please get up and eat my hunt so you may bless me as you said." Isaac got up, ate and drank, and was comforted. He blessed Jacob, and Jacob left his father. As soon as Isaac had blessed Jacob and he had gone, Esau returned from hunting. He also made savory meat and brought it to his father to eat and receive his blessing. Isaac said to Esau, "Who was it that brought me venison before you came, whom I blessed?" Esau realized his brother Jacob had done this, and his anger burned against Jacob for acting this way. Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? For he has deceived me twice. He took my birthright and now my blessing." Esau wept bitterly. When Isaac heard Esau weeping, he said, "What can I do, my son? Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing his father gave him, and his anger grew intensely. Jacob was terrified of his brother Esau and fled to Eber's house, Shem's son. He hid there because of his brother. Jacob was 63 years old when he left Canaan from Hebron. He stayed hidden in Eber's house for 14 years, continuing to learn the Elohim's ways and commandments. When Esau saw that Jacob had escaped and had cunningly obtained the blessing, he grieved deeply and was angry with his parents. He took his wife and left for Seir, where he lived. There Esau saw a woman from the daughters of Heth named Bosmath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. He married her in addition to his first wife and named her Adah, saying the blessing had passed from him. Esau lived in Seir for 6 months without seeing his parents. Then he took his wives and returned to Canaan, placing them in his father's house in Hebron. Esau's wives troubled and provoked Isaac and Rebekah with their actions, for they didn't follow the Elohim's ways, but served their father's wooden and stone gods as taught. They were more wicked than their father. They followed their evil desires, sacrificing and burning incense to the Baalim, until Isaac and Rebekah grew weary of them. Rebekah said, "I'm tired of living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob marries women like these daughters of the land, what good is life to me?" During this time, Esau's wife Adah conceived and bore him a son. Esau named him Eliphaz. Esau was 65 years old when Eliphaz was born. Ishmael, Abraham's son, died then, in Jacob's 64th year. Ishmael lived 137 years before he died. When Isaac heard of Ishmael's death, he mourned and lamented for many days. After 14 years at Eber's house, Jacob wanted to see his parents. He came home to Hebron, and by then Esau had forgotten what Jacob had done in taking his blessing. But when Esau saw Jacob visiting their parents, he remembered and became furious, wanting to kill him. Isaac, Abraham's son, was very old, and Esau said, "My father will die soon, and then I'll kill my brother Jacob." Rebekah heard about this and quickly sent for Jacob, saying, "Get up and flee to Haran to my brother Laban. Stay there until your brother's anger subsides, then return." Isaac called Jacob and said, "Don't take a wife from the Canaanite women. Our father Abraham commanded this according to the Elohim's word, saying, 'I will give this land to your descendants if they keep my covenant. Then I'll fulfill my promises and won't abandon them.' Now, my son, listen to my instructions. Don't take a Canaanite wife. Go to Haran to your mother's father Bethuel's house. Take a wife from Laban, your uncle's daughters. Be careful not to forget the Elohim, your Yahuwah, and his ways in the land you're going to. Don't get entangled with the local people, pursue worthless things, or forsake the Elohim, your Yahuwah. When you arrive, serve the Elohim there. Don't turn right or left from the way I commanded and you learned. May the Almighty Yahuwah grant you favor with the people there, so you can choose a good wife who follows the Elohim's ways. May Yahuwah give you and your descendants Abraham's blessing, make you fruitful, and multiply you into many people in that land, and bring you back to this land of your father with children, great wealth, joy, and pleasure." Isaac finished instructing and blessing Jacob, gave him many gifts including silver and gold, and sent him away. Jacob obeyed his parents, kissed them goodbye, and left for Paddan Aram. He was 77 years old when he left Canaan from Beersheba. When Jacob departed for Haran, Esau secretly told his son Eliphaz, "Take your sword, pursue Jacob, get ahead of him on the road, ambush him, and kill him in the mountains. Take everything he has and return." Eliphaz, Esau's son, was skilled with the bow as his father had taught him, and was a notable hunter and warrior. Eliphaz followed his father's orders. He was 13 years old then, and took 10 of his mother's brothers to pursue Jacob. He followed Jacob closely, and ambushed him near Canaan's border opposite Shechem. Jacob saw Eliphaz and his men pursuing him, and stopped to understand what was happening, not knowing their intent. Eliphaz drew his sword and advanced with his men toward Jacob. Jacob asked them, "What are you doing here? Why do you pursue me with swords?" Eliphaz approached and said, "My father commanded this, and I won't disobey him." When Jacob realized Esau had ordered Eliphaz to use force, he pleaded with Eliphaz and his men, saying, "Take everything I have, everything my parents gave me, and spare my life. May this be counted as righteousness to you." The Elohim made Eliphaz and his men favor Jacob, so they listened to him and didn't kill him. They took all his possessions, including the silver and gold he brought from Beersheba, leaving him nothing. Eliphaz and his men returned to Esau in Beersheba and reported everything that happened with Jacob, giving him all they had taken. Esau was angry with Eliphaz and his men for not killing Jacob. They answered Esau, "Because Jacob begged us not to kill him, we felt pity and took his possessions instead." Esau kept all the silver and gold Eliphaz had taken from Jacob in his house. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and forbidden him to marry Canaanite women, knowing Isaac and Rebekah considered Canaanite women unacceptable, he went to his uncle Ishmael's house and, in addition to his other wives, married Machlath, Ishmael's daughter, Nebaioth's sister. Chapter 30. Jacob continued his journey to Haran and came to Mount Moriah, where he stayed all night near the city of Luz. The Elohim appeared to Jacob that night and said to him, "I am Yahuwah, the Elohim of Abraham and Yahuwah of Isaac your father. I will give the land you are lying on to you and your descendants. Look, I am with you and will protect you wherever you go. I will multiply your descendants like the stars of heaven and cause all your enemies to fall before you. When they make war with you, they will not defeat you, and I will bring you back to this land with joy, with children, and with great riches." Jacob woke from his sleep and greatly rejoiced at the vision he had seen. He called that place Bethel. Jacob left that place full of joy, and his feet felt light as he walked. He went from there to the land of the children of the east, returned to Haran, and stopped at the shepherd's well. There he found some men going from Haran to feed their flocks. Jacob asked them about themselves, and they said, "We are from Haran." He asked them, "Do you know Laban, son of Nahor?" They replied, "We know him, and look, his daughter Rachel is coming to feed her father's flock." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel, Laban's daughter, came to feed her father's sheep, as she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, his mother's brother's daughter, he ran and kissed her, and began to weep aloud. Jacob told Rachel that he was Rebekah's son, her father's sister's son. Rachel ran to tell her father, while Jacob continued crying because he had nothing to bring to Laban's house. When Laban heard his sister's son Jacob had come, he ran to kiss him, embraced him, brought him into the house, and gave him bread, which he ate. Jacob told Laban what his brother Esau had done to him, and what Esau's son Eliphaz had done to him on the road. Jacob stayed in Laban's house for 1 month, eating and drinking there. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Tell me what your wages should be, for how can you serve me for nothing?" Laban had no sons, only daughters, and his other wives and handmaids were still barren at that time. These are the names of Laban's daughters born to him by his wife Adinah. The elder was named Leah, and the younger Rachel. Leah had tender eyes, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored, and Jacob loved her. Jacob said to Laban, "I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter." Laban agreed, and Jacob served Laban 7 years for his daughter Rachel. In the 2nd year of Jacob's stay in Haran, which was the 79th year of Jacob's life, Eber son of Shem died at the age of 464 years. When Jacob heard that Eber was dead, he grieved deeply and mourned for him many days. In the 3rd year of Jacob's stay in Haran, Bosmath, Ishmael's daughter and Esau's wife, gave birth to a son, and Esau named him Reuel. In Jacob's 4th year at Laban's house, the Elohim visited Laban and remembered him because of Jacob. Sons were born to him. His firstborn was Beor, his second was Alib, and the third was Korash. The Elohim gave Laban riches and honor, sons and daughters, and he became very wealthy because of Jacob. During those days Jacob served Laban in all kinds of work, both in the house and in the field. The blessing of the Elohim was in everything that belonged to Laban, both in the house and in the field. In the 5th year, Jehudith, Beeri's daughter and Esau's wife, died in Canaan. She had no sons, only daughters. These are the names of the daughters she bore to Esau. The elder was named Marzith, and the younger was named Puith. After Jehudith died, Esau went to Seir to hunt in the field as usual, and he lived in Seir for a long time. In the 6th year, Esau took another wife in addition to his other wives, Ahlibamah, daughter of Zebeon the Hivite, and brought her to Canaan. Ahlibamah conceived and bore Esau 3 sons, Yush, Yalan, and Korah. During this time in Canaan, there was conflict between Esau's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Canaan's inhabitants. Esau's cattle and possessions had become too numerous for him to remain in Canaan, in his father's house, and the land could not support him because of his cattle. When Esau saw that the conflicts with Canaan's inhabitants were increasing, he gathered his wives, sons, daughters, and all his belongings, including the cattle he owned and all the property he had acquired in Canaan. He left the inhabitants of the land and went to Seir, where he and all his household settled. Esau would occasionally visit his father and mother in Canaan. He intermarried with the Horites and gave his daughters to the sons of Seir the Horite. He gave his elder daughter Marzith to Anah, son of Zebeon, his wife's brother, and Puith he gave to Azar, son of Bilhan the Horite. Esau lived in the mountain with his children, where they were fruitful and multiplied. Chapter 31. In the 7th year, Jacob completed his service to Laban, and Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for I have fulfilled my days of service." Laban agreed, and they gathered all the people of that place, and made a feast. In the evening, Laban came to the house, and afterward Jacob came with the people of the feast. Laban put out all the lights in the house. Jacob said to Laban, "Why are you doing this to us?" Laban answered, "This is our custom in this land." Then Laban took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob. He went to her, but Jacob did not know it was Leah. Laban gave his daughter Leah his maid Zilpah as a handmaid. All the people at the feast knew what Laban had done to Jacob, but they did not tell Jacob. All the neighbors came that night to Jacob's house. They ate, drank, rejoiced, and played timbrels before Leah, dancing and calling out before Jacob, "Heleah, Heleah." Jacob heard their words but did not understand their meaning, thinking it might be their custom in this land. The neighbors spoke these words before Jacob during the night, while all the lights in Laban's house remained dark. In the morning, when daylight came, Jacob turned to his wife and saw it was Leah who had been lying in his arms. Jacob said, "Now I understand what the neighbors were saying last night. Helia, but I did not know it then." Jacob called to Laban and said, "What have you done to me? I served you for Rachel. Why have you deceived me and given me Leah?" Laban answered Jacob, "In our place we do not give the younger before the elder. If you want her sister as well, serve me for another 7 years and take her too." Jacob did so, also taking Rachel as a wife. He served Laban 7 more years. Jacob went to Rachel as well, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. Laban gave her his maid Bilhah as a handmaid. When the Elohim saw that Leah was unloved, the Elohim opened her womb, and she conceived and bore Jacob 4 sons in those days. These are their names: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. After that, she stopped bearing children. At that time, Rachel was barren and had no children. Rachel envied her sister Leah, and when she saw that she bore no children to Jacob, she took her handmaid Bilhah, who bore Jacob 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing children, she also took her handmaid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Jacob went to Zilpah as well, and she bore Jacob 2 sons, Gad and Asher. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob 2 more sons and 1 daughter, Issachar, Zebulun, and their sister Dinah. Rachel remained barren, and she prayed to the Elohim, saying, "O Elohim Yahuwah, remember me and visit me. I beg you, for now my husband will cast me off, since I have given him no children. O Elohim Yahuwah, hear my prayer before you, see my affliction, and give me children like the handmaids, so I may no longer bear my shame." Yahuwah heard her and opened her womb. Rachel conceived and bore a son, saying, "The Elohim has taken away my shame." She named him Joseph, saying, "May the Elohim add another son to me." Jacob was 91 years old when she bore him. At that time, Jacob's mother Rebekah sent her nurse Deborah, daughter of Uz, and 2 of Isaac's servants to Jacob. They came to Jacob in Haran and said, "Rebekah has sent us to tell you to return to your father's house in Canaan." Jacob listened to his mother's message. By then, the additional 7 years Jacob served Laban for Rachel were complete. After living in Haran for 14 years, Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wives and let me go to my land, for my mother has sent word from Canaan that I should return to my father's house." Laban said to him, "Please, if I have found favor with you, don't leave. Name your wages, and I will pay them. Stay with me." Jacob said, "This is what you should give me as wages. Today I will go through your flock and take away every speckled and spotted lamb, and the brown ones among the sheep and among the goats. If you do this for me, I will return to feed and keep your flock as before." Laban agreed and removed from his flock all that Jacob had described and gave them to him. Jacob put everything he had removed from Laban's flock in his son's care, while he continued tending the rest of Laban's flock. When Isaac's servants saw that Jacob would not return with them to Canaan, they left him and went back home to Canaan. Deborah stayed with Jacob in Haran and did not return with Isaac's servants to Canaan. She lived with Jacob's wives and children in Haran. Jacob served Laban for 6 more years. When the sheep gave birth, Jacob removed the speckled and spotted ones as agreed with Laban. He did this at Laban's for 6 years, and he became very wealthy, acquiring cattle, male and female servants, camels and donkeys. Jacob had 200 herds of cattle. His cattle were large, beautiful, and very productive. All the families wanted some of Jacob's cattle because they were so prosperous. Many people came to acquire some of Jacob's flock. Jacob would trade them a sheep for a male servant, female servant, donkey, camel, or whatever he wanted from them. Jacob gained wealth, honor, and possessions through these dealings with people, and Laban's children became envious of his success. Eventually, he heard Laban's sons saying, "Jacob has taken everything that belonged to our father. He has gained all this wealth from what was our father's." Jacob noticed that Laban and his children's attitude toward him had changed from what it had been before. The Elohim appeared to Jacob after the 6 years and said, Leave this land and return to your birthplace, and I will be with you." Jacob immediately mounted his children and wives and all his belongings on camels and set out for Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban didn't know Jacob had left because he was sheep shearing that day. Rachel stole her father's images, hiding them in her camel's saddle as she left. These images were made in this way. They would take a firstborn man, kill him, cut off his hair, salt his head, anoint it with oil, then take a small copper or gold tablet, write a name on it, place it under the tongue, put the head with the tablet in a house, light candles before it, and bow to it. When people bowed to it, it would answer their questions through the power of the name written on it. Some made these images in human form from gold and silver, consulting them at specific times. The figures received influence from the stars and foretold future events. These were the kind of images Rachel stole from her father. Rachel stole these images, so Laban couldn't use them to discover where Jacob had gone. When Laban came home and asked about Jacob's household, they were nowhere to be found. He searched for his images to locate Jacob but couldn't find them. He consulted other images, which told him Jacob had fled to his father in Canaan. Laban gathered his brothers and servants and pursued Jacob, catching up to him at Mount Gilead. Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done, fleeing secretly and carrying off my daughters like captives of war? You didn't let me kiss them goodbye or send them away with joy, and you stole my gods and left." Jacob answered, "I was afraid you would take your daughters from me by force. Whoever you find your gods with shall die." Laban searched for the images in all Jacob's tents and belongings, but couldn't find them. Laban said to Jacob, "Let's make a covenant as a witness between us. If you mistreat my daughters or take other wives besides them, Yahuwah will be witness between us." They gathered stones into a heap, and Laban said, "This heap is a witness between us," so they named it Gilead. Jacob and Laban offered sacrifices on the mountain and ate by the heap. They stayed there overnight. And in the morning, Laban wept, kissed his daughters, and returned home. He quickly sent his 17-year-old son Beor with Abichoroth, son of Uz, son of Nahor, and 10 men with them. They hurried ahead of Jacob by a different road to Seir. They came to Esau and said, "Your brother and relative, your mother's brother Laban, son of Bethuel, says, 'Have you heard what your brother Jacob did to me? He came to me with nothing, and I welcomed him honorably into my house, made him great, and gave him my 2 daughters as wives, plus 2 maids. Yahuwah blessed him because of me, and he prospered greatly with sons, daughters, and maid-servants. He has vast flocks and herds, camels, donkeys, and abundant silver and gold. When he saw his wealth increase, he secretly fled while I was shearing sheep. He put his wives and children on camels and took all his cattle and property acquired in my land, heading to his father Isaac in Canaan. He didn't let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren goodbye, but led them away like captives and stole my gods before fleeing. And I left him at the brook of Jabbok with all his belongings. He lacks nothing. Now, if you wish to go to him, you'll find him there and can do as you please." Laban's messengers told Esau all this. When Esau heard the messenger's words, his anger burned against Jacob, remembering his hatred. Esau quickly gathered his children, servants, and household, 60 men total. He assembled all the children of Seir the Horite and their people, 340 men, creating a force of 400 armed men to attack Jacob. Esau divided this army into several parts. He took the 60 men of his household as one unit under his eldest son, Eliphaz's command. He put the remaining units under the 6 sons of Seir the Horite, with each man commanding his own generations and children. The entire camp moved together, with Esau among them, heading toward Jacob with speed. Laban's messengers left Esau and went to Canaan to Rebekah, mother of Jacob and Esau. They told her, "Your son Esau has gone against his brother Jacob with 400 men. He heard Jacob was coming and went to make war and take everything he has." Rebekah quickly sent 72 of Isaac's servants to meet Jacob on the road, thinking Esau might attack Jacob when they met. These messengers met Jacob on the road by the brook Jabbok. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This camp is from Yahuwah," and named that place Machnayim. Jacob recognized his father's people, kissed and embraced them. He asked about his father and mother, and they said they were well. The messengers told Jacob, "Your mother Rebekah sent us, saying, 'My son, I heard your brother Esau is coming against you on the road with men from Seir the Horite. Therefore, my son, listen to me. Consider carefully what you will do. When he comes, speak humbly to him, don't be harsh, and give him a present from your possessions and from what Yahuwah has blessed you with. When he asks about your affairs, be completely honest. Perhaps this will turn away his anger, and you will save yourself and all who belong to you. You must honor him as your elder brother.'" When Jacob heard his mother's message from the messengers, he wept bitterly and did as she commanded. Chapter 32. At that time Jacob sent messengers to his brother Esau toward the land of Seir, and he spoke words of supplication to him. He commanded them, saying, "Say this to my brother Esau. Your servant Jacob says, 'Do not imagine that my father's blessing with which he blessed me has proved beneficial to me. For I have been these 20 years with Laban, and he deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, as has all been already told to you. I served him in his house very laboriously, and Yahuwah afterward saw my affliction, my labor, and the work of my hands, and he caused me to find grace and favor in his sight. Afterward, through Yahuwah's great mercy and kindness, I acquired oxen, donkeys, cattle, and servants, both male and female. Now I am coming to my land and my home to my father and mother, who are in the land of Canaan. I have sent to let you know all this to find favor in your sight, so you may not imagine that I have obtained wealth by myself, or that the blessing with which my father blessed me has benefited me." Those messengers went to Esau, and found him on the borders of the land of Edom going toward Jacob, with 400 men of the children of Seir the Horite, standing with drawn swords. The messengers of Jacob told Esau all the words that Jacob had spoken to them concerning Esau. Esau answered them with pride and contempt, saying, "Surely I have heard, and truly it has been told to me what Jacob has done to Laban, who exalted him in his house, and gave him his daughters for wives. He had sons and daughters, and abundantly increased in wealth and riches in Laban's house through his means. When he saw that his wealth was abundant and his riches great, he fled with all belonging to him from Laban's house, and he led Laban's daughters away from their father's face, as captives taken by the sword without telling him. Not only to Laban has Jacob done this, but also to me has he done so, and has twice supplanted me. Should I be silent? Now therefore I have come this day with my camps to meet him, and I will do to him according to the desire of my heart." The messengers returned to Jacob and said, "We came to your brother Esau and told him all your words. This is how he answered us, and behold, he comes to meet you with 400 men. Now then know and see what you will do, and pray before Yahuwah to deliver you from him." When he heard his brother's words spoken to Jacob's messengers, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. Jacob prayed to Elohim his Yahuwah, saying, "O Elohim Yahuwah of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, you said to me when I went away from my father's house, I am the Elohim Yahuwah of your father Abraham and the Yahuwah of Isaac. To you I give this land and your seed after you, and I will make your seed as the stars of heaven. You will spread forth to the 4 sides of heaven, and in you and in your seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. You established your words and gave me riches and children and cattle, as the utmost wishes of my heart you gave to your servant. You gave me all that I asked from you, so that I lacked nothing. You afterward said to me, Return to your parents and to your birthplace, and I will still do well with you. Now that I have come and you delivered me from Laban, I will fall into Esau's hands, who will kill me, together with my children's mothers. Therefore, O Elohim Yahuwah, deliver me, I pray, also from my brother Esau's hands, for I am greatly afraid of him. If there is no righteousness in me, do it for Abraham and my father Isaac's sake, for I know that through kindness and mercy I have acquired this wealth. Now therefore I beg you to deliver me this day with your kindness, and to answer me." Jacob ceased praying to Elohim, and divided the people with him, along with the flocks and cattle, into 2 camps. He gave half to Damesek, Abraham's servant Eliezer's son, for a camp with his children, and the other half he gave to his brother Elianus, Eleazar's son, for a camp with his children. He commanded them, saying, "Keep your camps at a distance from each other. Do not come too near each other. If Esau comes to one camp and destroys it, the other camp at a distance will escape him." Jacob stayed there that night, and during the whole night he gave his servants instructions concerning the forces and his children. Elohim heard Jacob's prayer that day, and delivered Jacob from his brother Esau's hands. Elohim sent 3 angels of heaven, and they went before Esau. These angels appeared to Esau and his people as 2,000 men riding horses, furnished with all sorts of war instruments. They appeared to Esau and all his men to be divided into 4 camps, with 4 chiefs leading them. One camp went on and found Esau coming with 400 men toward his brother Jacob. This camp ran toward Esau and his people, and terrified them. Esau fell off his horse in alarm, and all his men separated from him in that place, for they were greatly afraid. The whole camp shouted after them as they fled from Esau, and all the warlike men answered, saying, "Surely we are Jacob's servants, who is Yahuwah's servant, and who then can stand against us?" Esau said to them, "O then, my lord and brother Jacob is your lord, whom I have not seen for these 20 years. Now that I have come this day to see him, do you treat me in this manner?" The angels answered him, saying, "As Elohim lives, if Jacob, of whom you speak, were not your brother, we would not have let one remain from you and your people, but only because of Jacob will we do nothing to them." This camp passed from Esau and his men and went away. When Esau and his men had gone about a league, the second camp came toward him with all sorts of weapons, and they also did to Esau and his men as the first camp had done. When they had left to go on, the third camp came toward him, and they were all terrified. Esau fell off his horse, and the whole camp cried out, saying, "Surely we are Jacob's servants, who is Yahuwah's servant, and who can stand against us?" Esau again answered them, saying, "O then Jacob my lord and your lord is my brother, and for 20 years I have not seen his face. Hearing this day that he was coming, I went to meet him, and do you treat me in this manner?" They answered him, saying, "As Elohim lives, if Jacob were not your brother, as you say, we would not have left anyone from you and your men. But because Jacob, of whom you speak, is your brother, we will not interfere with you or your men." The third camp also passed from them, and he still continued his road with his men toward Jacob, when the fourth camp came toward him, and they also did to him and his men as the others had done. When Esau saw the evil which the 4 angels had done to him and his men, he became greatly afraid of his brother Jacob, and he went to meet him in peace. Esau concealed his hatred against Jacob because he feared for his life on account of his brother Jacob, and because he imagined that the 4 camps he had encountered were Jacob's servants. Jacob stayed that night with his servants in their camps, and he decided with his servants to give Esau a present from all that he had with him and from all his property. Jacob rose in the morning with his men, and they chose from among the cattle a present for Esau. This is the amount of the present Jacob chose from his flock to give to his brother Esau. He selected 240 head from the flocks, 30 each from the camels and donkeys, and 50 cattle from the herds. He put them all in 10 droves, and he placed each sort by itself, delivering them into the hands of 10 of his servants, each drove by itself. He commanded them, saying, "Keep yourselves at a distance from each other, and put a space between the droves. When Esau and those with him meet you and ask, 'Whose are you, and where do you go, and to whom belongs all this before you?' you shall say, 'We are Jacob's servants, and we come to meet Esau in peace, and behold, Jacob comes behind us. This before us is a present sent from Jacob to his brother Esau.' If they ask you, 'Why does he delay behind you from coming to meet his brother and see his face?' then say to them, 'Surely he comes joyfully behind us to meet his brother, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goes to him, and after this I will see his face, perhaps he will accept me.'" So the whole present passed on in his servants' hands, going before him that day, and he lodged that night with his camps by the border of the brook of Jabbok. He rose in the midst of the night, took his wives and maidservants, and all belonging to him, and that night passed them over the ford Jabbok. When he had passed all belonging to him over the brook, Jacob was left by himself, and a man met him and wrestled with him that night until daybreak. The hollow of Jacob's thigh was displaced through wrestling with him. At daybreak the man left Jacob there, blessed him and went away. Jacob passed the brook at daybreak, and he limped upon his thigh. The sun rose upon him when he had passed the brook, and he came to the place of his cattle and children. They went on until midday, and while they were going the present was passing before them. Jacob lifted up his eyes and saw Esau at a distance, coming with about 400 men, and Jacob was greatly afraid of his brother. Jacob quickly divided his children among his wives and handmaids, and his daughter Dinah he put in a chest, delivering her into his servants' hands. He passed before his children and wives to meet his brother, and he bowed down to the ground 7 times until he approached his brother. Yahuwah caused Jacob to find grace and favor in Esau and his men's sight, for Yahuwah had heard Jacob's prayer. The fear of Jacob and his terror fell upon his brother Esau, for Esau was greatly afraid of Jacob because of what Yahuwah's angels had done to Esau, and Esau's anger against Jacob turned to kindness. When Esau saw Jacob running toward him, he also ran toward him, embraced him, fell upon his neck, and they kissed and wept. Yahuwah put fear and kindness toward Jacob in the hearts of the men who came with Esau, and they also kissed Jacob and embraced him. Eliphaz, Esau's son, with his 4 brothers, Esau's sons, also wept with Jacob, kissed him and embraced him, for the fear of Jacob had fallen upon them all. Chapter 33. Some time after Jacob went away from the borders of the land, he came to the land of Shalem, that is the city of Shechem, in the land of Canaan, and he rested in front of the city. He bought a parcel of the field there from the children of Hamor, the people of the land, for 5 shekels. Jacob built himself a house there, pitched his tent, and made booths for his cattle. Therefore he called that place Succoth. Jacob remained in Succoth for 1 year and 6 months. At that time, some women of the land's inhabitants went to the city of Shechem to dance and rejoice with the daughters of the city. When they went forth, Rachel and Leah, Jacob's wives, with their families also went to watch the rejoicing of the city's daughters. Dinah, Jacob's daughter, also went with them and saw the daughters of the city. They remained there before these daughters, while all the city's people stood by them to watch their rejoicing, and all the great people of the city were there. Shechem, Hamor's son, the prince of the land, was also standing there to see them. Shechem saw Dinah, Jacob's daughter, sitting with her mother before the city's daughters. The young woman pleased him greatly, and he asked his friends and people, saying, "Whose daughter is that sitting among the women whom I do not know in this city?" They said to him, "Surely this is the daughter of Jacob, son of Isaac the Hebrew, who has lived in this city for some time." When it was reported that the daughters of the land were going forth to rejoice, she went with her mother and maidservants to sit among them, as you see. Shechem beheld Dinah, Jacob's daughter, and when he looked at her, his soul became fixed upon Dinah. He sent and had her taken by force. Dinah came to Shechem's house, and he seized her forcibly, lay with her and humbled her. He loved her exceedingly and placed her in his house. They came and told this to Jacob. When Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, he sent 12 of his servants to fetch Dinah from Shechem's house. They went to Shechem's house to take Dinah away. When they came, Shechem went out to them with his men and drove them from his house. He would not let them come before Dinah, but Shechem was sitting with Dinah, kissing and embracing her before their eyes. Jacob's servants came back and told him, saying, "When we came, he and his men drove us away, and this is what Shechem did to Dinah before our eyes." Jacob knew moreover that Shechem had defiled his daughter, but he said nothing. His sons were feeding his cattle in the field, and Jacob remained silent until their return. Before his sons came home, Jacob sent 2 maidens from his servants' daughters to take care of Dinah in Shechem's house, and to stay with her. Shechem sent 3 of his friends to his father Hamor, son of Chiddechem, son of Pered, saying, "Get me this young woman for a wife." Hamor the Hivite, son of Chiddechem, came to his son Shechem's house and sat before him. Hamor said to his son, "Shechem, Is there no woman among your people's daughters that you will take a Hebrew woman who is not of your people?" Shechem said to him, "You must get her alone for me, for she is delightful in my sight." Hamor did according to his son's word, for he greatly loved him. Hamor went to Jacob to discuss this matter. When he had left his son Shechem's house before he came to speak to Jacob, Jacob's sons had come from the field, as soon as they heard what Shechem had done. The men were very grieved concerning their sister, and they all came home fired with anger before the time of gathering in their cattle. They came and sat before their father and spoke to him, burning with wrath, saying, "Surely death is due to this man and his household, because the Elohim Yahuwah of the whole earth commanded Noah and his children that man shall never rob nor commit adultery. Now behold, Shechem has both ravaged and committed fornication with our sister, and not one of the city's people spoke a word to him. Surely you know and understand that the death sentence is due to Shechem, his father, and the whole city for what he has done." While they were speaking to their father about this matter, Hamor, Shechem's father, came to speak to Jacob about his son's words concerning Dinah, and he sat before Jacob and his sons. Hamor spoke to them, saying, "My son Shechem's soul longs for your daughter. Please give her to him for a wife and intermarry with us. Give us your daughters, and we will give you our daughters, and you shall live with us in our land, and we will be as one people. Our land is very extensive, so live and trade in it and get possessions in it, and do as you desire. No one will prevent you by saying a word to you." Hamor finished speaking to Jacob and his sons, and behold, his son Shechem had come after him and sat before them. Shechem spoke before Jacob and his sons, saying, "May I find favor in your sight, that you will give me your daughter, and whatever you say to me I will do for her. Ask me for abundance of dowry and gift, and I will give it. Whatever you say to me I will do, and whoever rebels against your orders shall die. Only give me the young woman for a wife." Simeon and Levi answered Hamor and his son Shechem deceitfully, saying, "All you have spoken to us we will do for you. Behold, our sister is in your house, but keep away from her until we send to our father Isaac concerning this matter, for we can do nothing without his consent. For he knows the ways of our father Abraham, and whatever he says to us, we will tell you. We will conceal nothing from you." Simeon and Levi spoke this to Shechem and his father, to find a pretext and to seek counsel about what to do to Shechem and his city in this matter. When Shechem and his father heard Simeon and Levi's words, it seemed good to them, and Shechem and his father left to go home. When they had gone, Jacob's sons said to their father, "Behold, we know that death is due to these wicked ones and their city, because they transgressed what Yahuwah commanded to Noah and his children, and his seed after them. Also because Shechem did this thing to our sister Dinah in defiling her, for such vileness shall never be done among us. Now therefore know and see what you will do, and seek counsel and pretext about what to do to them, to kill all the city's inhabitants." Simeon said to them, "Here is proper advice for you. Tell them to circumcise every male among them as we are circumcised, and if they do not wish to do this, we shall take our daughter from them and go away. If they consent to do this and will do it, then when they are weak with pain, we will attack them with our swords, as upon one who is quiet and peaceable, and we will kill every male person among them." Simeon's advice pleased them, and Simeon and Levi resolved to do to them as proposed. The next morning, Shechem and his father Hamor came again to Jacob and his sons to speak concerning Dinah, and to hear what answer Jacob's sons would give to their words. Jacob's sons spoke deceitfully to them, saying, "We told our father Isaac all your words, and your words pleased him. But he spoke to us, saying, Thus did Abraham his father command him from Yahuwah, the Elohim of the whole earth, that any man who is not of his descendants who wishes to take one of his daughters shall cause every male belonging to him to be circumcised, as we are circumcised, and then we may give him our daughter for a wife. Now we have made known to you all our ways that our father spoke to us, for we cannot do what you spoke to us, to give our daughter to an uncircumcised man, for it is a disgrace to us. But we will consent to you in this, to give you our daughter, and we will also take your daughters for ourselves, and will live among you and be one people as you have spoken, if you will listen to us and consent to be like us. to circumcise every male belonging to you as we are circumcised. If you will not listen to us, to have every male circumcised as we are circumcised, as we have commanded, then we will come to you, take our daughter from you, and go away." Shechem and his father Hamor heard Jacob's sons' words, and the thing pleased them exceedingly. Shechem and his father Hamor hastened to do Jacob's sons' wishes, for Shechem was very fond of Dinah, and his soul was bound to her. Shechem and his father Hamor hurried to the city gate, assembled all their city's men, and spoke to them Jacob's sons' words, saying, "We came to these men, Jacob's sons, and spoke to them concerning their daughter, and these men will consent to do according to our wishes. Behold, our land is extensive enough for them, and they will live in it and trade in it, and we shall be one people. We will take their daughters, and our daughters we will give to them for wives. But only on this condition will these men consent to do this thing, that every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised, as their Yahuwah commanded them. When we have done according to their instructions to be circumcised, then they will live among us, together with their cattle and possessions, and we shall be as one people with them." When all the city's men heard Shechem and his father Hamor's words, they all agreed to this proposal and consented to be circumcised, for Shechem and his father Hamor were greatly esteemed by them, being the princes of the land. The next day Shechem and his father Hamor rose up early in the morning, assembled all their city's men in the middle of the city, and called for Jacob's sons, who circumcised every male belonging to them on that day and the next. They circumcised Shechem and his father Hamor, and Shechem's 5 brothers, and then everyone rose up and went home, for this thing was from Elohim against the city of Shechem, and from Elohim was Simeon's counsel in this matter, so that Elohim might deliver the city of Shechem into the hands of Jacob's 2 sons. Chapter 34. The number of all the males who were circumcised was 645 men, and 246 children. But Chiddechem, son of Pered, Hamor's father, and his 6 brothers, would not listen to Shechem and his father Hamor, and they would not be circumcised. The proposal of Jacob's sons was loathsome in their sight, and their anger was greatly roused that the city's people had not listened to them. In the evening of the 2nd day, they found 8 small children who had not been circumcised, for their mothers had hidden them from Shechem and his father Hamor, and from the men of the city. When Shechem and his father Hamor sent to have them brought before them to be circumcised, Chiddechem and his 6 brothers sprang at them with their swords, seeking to kill them. They sought to kill Shechem and his father Hamor as well, and they sought to kill Dinah with them because of this matter. They said to them, "What is this thing that you have done? Are there no women among your Canaanite brothers' daughters, that you wish to take Hebrew daughters for yourselves, whom you did not know before, and will do this act which your fathers never commanded you? Do you imagine you will succeed through this act you have done? And what will you answer in this affair to your Canaanite brothers, who will come tomorrow and ask you about this thing? If your act shall not appear just and good in their sight, what will you do for your lives, and we for our lives, in your not having listened to our voices? If the inhabitants of the land and all your brothers, the children of Ham, hear of your act, saying, 'Because of a Hebrew woman did Shechem and Hamor his father, and all their city's inhabitants, do that which they had been unacquainted with, and which their ancestors never commanded them,' where then will you flee, or where conceal your shame, all your days before your brothers, the inhabitants of the land of Canaan? Now therefore we cannot bear this thing you have done, neither can we be burdened with this yoke which our ancestors did not command us. Tomorrow we will go and assemble all our brothers, the Canaanite brothers who live in the land, and we will all come and strike you, and all those who trust in you, so that no remnant will be left from you or them." When Hamor and his son Shechem and all the city's people heard Chiddechem and his brothers' words, they were terribly afraid for their lives at their words, and they regretted what they had done. Shechem and his father Hamor answered their father Chiddechem and his brothers, saying, "All the words you spoke to us are true. Do not say or imagine in your hearts that we did this thing, which our ancestors did not command us, because of love for the Hebrews, but because we saw that it was not their intention and desire to agree to our wishes concerning their daughter, except on this condition. We listened to their voices and did this act which you saw, to obtain our desire from them. When we have obtained our request from them, we will then return to them and do to them what you say to us. We beg you to wait until our flesh is healed and we become strong again, and we will then go together against them and do to them what is in your hearts and in ours." Dinah, Jacob's daughter, heard all these words which Chiddekem and his brothers had spoken, and what Hamor and his son Shechem and their city's people had answered them. She quickly sent one of her maidens, whom her father had sent to take care of her in Shechem's house, to Jacob her father and to her brothers, saying, "Thus did Chiddekem and his brothers advise concerning you, and thus did Hamor and Shechem and the city's people answer them." When Jacob heard these words, he was filled with wrath, and he was indignant at them, and his anger was kindled against them. Simeon and Levi swore and said, "As Elohim lives, the Yahuwah of the whole earth, by this time tomorrow there shall not be a remnant left in the whole city." 20 young men who were not circumcised had hidden themselves, and these young men fought against Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi killed 18 of them, and 2 fled from them and escaped to some lime pits in the city. Simeon and Levi searched for them but could not find them. Simeon and Levi continued going about in the city, and they killed all the city's people by the sword's edge, leaving none remaining. There was great terror in the midst of the city, and the cry of the city's people ascended to heaven, and all the women and children cried aloud. Simeon and Levi killed all in the city. They did not leave a male remaining in the whole city. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem by the sword's edge, and they took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. Jacob's sons went and returned, coming upon the slain, and took all their property which was in the city and the field. While they were taking the spoil, 300 men stood up and threw dust at them and struck them with stones. Simeon turned to them and killed them all with the sword's edge, and Simeon turned before Levi and came into the city. They took away their sheep, oxen, and cattle, and also the remaining women and little ones. They led all these away, opened a gate, went out, and came to their father Jacob with vigor. When Jacob saw all that they had done to the city, and saw the spoil they took from them, Jacob was very angry at them and said to them, "What is this that you have done to me? I had obtained rest among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land, and none of them interfered with me. Now you have acted to make me offensive to the land's inhabitants, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I am but few in number. They will all gather against me and kill me when they hear of your work with their brothers, and I and my household will be destroyed." Simeon and Levi and all their brothers answered their father Jacob, saying, "We live in the land, and shall Shechem do this to our sister? Why are you silent about all that Shechem has done? Shall he treat our sister like a harlot in the streets?" The number of women whom Simeon and Levi took captive from the city of Shechem, whom they did not kill, was 85, who had not known man. Among them was a beautiful young woman named Bunah, and Simeon took her for a wife. The number of males they took captive and did not kill was 47 men. The rest they killed. All the young men and women that Simeon and Levi had taken captive from the city of Shechem became servants to Jacob's sons and to their children after them, until the day Jacob's sons left Egypt. When Simeon and Levi had gone from the city, the 2 young men who had hidden themselves and had not died with the city's people rose up. These young men went into the city and walked about in it, finding the city desolate without men, only women weeping. These young men cried out, saying, "This is the evil which Jacob's Hebrew sons did to this city in destroying one of the Canaanite cities today, and were not afraid for their lives from all the land of Canaan." These men left the city and went to Tapnach, where they told the inhabitants all that had happened to them, and all that Jacob's sons had done to Shechem. The news reached Jashub, king of Tapnach, and he sent men to Shechem to see these young men, for the king did not believe their account, saying, "How could 2 men destroy such a large town as Shechem?" Jashub's messengers returned, saying, "We came to the city, and it is destroyed with no man there. Only weeping women remain. Neither is there any flock or cattle, for Jacob's sons took away all that was in the city." Jashub wondered at this, saying, "How could 2 men do this thing, destroying so large a city with no one able to stand against them?" Nothing like this has happened since Nimrod's days, not even from the most ancient times. And Jashub, king of Tapnach, said to his people, "Be courageous, and we will fight these Hebrews, and do to them as they did to the city, and we will avenge the city's people." Jashub, king of Tapnach, consulted with his counselors about this matter, and his advisers said, "Alone you will not prevail over the Hebrews, for they must be powerful to do this work to the whole city. If 2 of them destroyed the whole city, with no one opposing them, surely if you go against them, they will all rise against us and destroy us likewise. But if you send to all the surrounding kings and they come together, we will go with them and fight Jacob's sons, then you will prevail against them." Jashub heard his counselors' words, which pleased him and his people, and he did so. Jashub, king of Tapnach, sent to all the Amorite kings surrounding Shechem and Tapnach, saying, "Join me and help me strike Jacob the Hebrew and all his sons, and destroy them from the earth, for this is what he did to Shechem city. Do you not know of it?" All the Amorite kings heard of the evil that Jacob's sons had done to Shechem city, and they were greatly astonished. The 7 Amorite kings assembled with their armies, about 10,000 men with drawn swords, to fight against Jacob's sons. Jacob heard that the Amorite kings had gathered to fight his sons, and he was greatly afraid and distressed. Jacob protested against Simeon and Levi, saying, "What is this act you did? Why have you harmed me, bringing all of Canaan's children against me to destroy me and my household? I was at peace, even I and my household, and you have done this thing to me, provoking the land's inhabitants against me by your actions." Judah answered his father, saying, "Was it for nothing my brothers Simeon and Levi killed all Shechem's inhabitants? Surely it was because Shechem had humbled our sister and transgressed our Yahuwah's command to Noah and his children, for Shechem took our sister by force and committed adultery with her. Shechem did all this evil, and none of his city's inhabitants interfered to say, 'Why will you do this?' Surely for this my brothers went and struck the city, and Elohim delivered it into their hands, because its inhabitants had transgressed our Yahuwah's commands. Was it for nothing they did all this? Why are you afraid or distressed, and why are you displeased with my brothers, and why is your anger kindled against them? Surely our Yahuwah, who delivered Shechem city and its people into their hands, will also deliver all the Canaanite kings who come against us into our hands, and we will do to them as my brothers did to Shechem. Be at peace about them and cast away your fears, but trust in Elohim our Yahuwah, and pray to him to help us and deliver our enemies into our hands." Judah called to one of his father's servants, "Go now and see where these kings who are coming against us are positioned with their armies." The servant went and looked far off, going up opposite Mount Sihon, and saw all the kings' camps standing in the fields. He returned to Judah and said, "The kings are positioned in the field with all their camps, an exceedingly numerous people, like sand upon the seashore." Judah said to Simeon and Levi and all his brothers, "Strengthen yourselves and be valiant sons, for Elohim our Yahuwah is with us. Do not fear them. Stand forth each man armed with his weapons of war, his bow and sword, and we will go fight these uncircumcised men. Elohim is our Yahuwah, he will save us." They rose up, and each armed himself with his weapons of war, great and small, 11 sons of Jacob, and all Jacob's servants with them. All of Isaac's servants who were with Isaac in Hebron came to them equipped with all sorts of war instruments. Jacob's sons and their servants, being 112 men, went toward these kings, and Jacob also went with them. Jacob's sons sent to their father Isaac, Abraham's son, in Hebron, which is Kiriath Arba, saying, "Wait, please pray for us to Elohim our Yahuwah, to protect us from the Canaanites who are coming against us, and to deliver them into our hands." Isaac, Abraham's son, prayed to Elohim for his sons, saying, "O Elohim Yahuwah, you promised my father, saying, 'I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven,' and you also promised me. Now establish your word, as the kings of Canaan are gathering to make war with my children, though they committed no violence. Now therefore, O Elohim Yahuwah, Yahuwah of the whole earth, turn away, I pray, the counsel of these kings, that they may not fight against my sons. Fill the hearts of these kings and their people with terror of my sons, and bring down their pride, that they may turn away from my sons. With your strong hand and outstretched arm, Deliver my sons and their servants from them, for power and might are in your hands to do all this." Jacob's sons and their servants went toward these kings, trusting in Elohim their Yahuwah. While they were going, Jacob their father also prayed to Elohim, saying, "O Elohim Yahuwah, powerful and exalted Yahuwah, who has reigned from ancient days until now and forever. You are he who stirs up wars and causes them to cease. In your hand are power and might to exalt and bring down. May my prayer be acceptable before you, that you may turn to me with your mercies, to fill these kings and their people's hearts with terror of my sons, and terrify them and their camps, and with your great kindness deliver all those who trust in you, for it is you who can bring people under us and reduce nations under our power." Chapter 35. All the Amorite kings came and took their stand in the field to consult with their counselors about what to do with Jacob's sons, for they were still afraid of them, saying, "Look, 2 of them killed everyone in Shechem city." Elohim heard Isaac and Jacob's prayers, and he filled all these kings' advisers' hearts with great fear and terror, that they unanimously exclaimed, "Are you foolish today? Or is there no understanding in you that you will fight with the Hebrews? Why will you take delight in your own destruction today? Look, 2 of them came to Shechem city without fear or terror, and they killed all the city's inhabitants so that no one stood against them. How will you be able to fight with all of them? Surely you know that their Yahuwah is exceedingly fond of them, and has done mighty things for them, such as have not been done since ancient days, and among all the nations' gods, none can do like his mighty deeds. Surely he delivered their father Abraham the Hebrew from Nimrod's hand, and from all his people, who had many times sought to kill him. He delivered him also from the fire into which King Nimrod had cast him, and his Yahuwah delivered him from it. Who else can do the like? Surely it was Abraham who killed the 5 kings of Elam when they had harmed his brother's son, who then lived in Sodom. He took his faithful servant and a few of his men, and they pursued the kings of Elam in one night and killed them, and restored to his brother's son all his property which they had taken from him. Surely you know the Yahuwah of these Hebrews delights greatly in them, and they also delight in him, for they know that he delivered them from all their enemies. And look, through his love toward his Yahuwah, Abraham took his only and precious son, and intended to offer him as a burnt offering to his Yahuwah, and had Yahuwah not prevented him from doing this, he would have done it through his love for his Yahuwah. And Yahuwah saw all his works and swore to him, and promised him that he would deliver his sons and all his seed from every trouble that would befall them, because he had done this thing, and through his love for his Yahuwah stifled his compassion for his child. Have you not heard what their Yahuwah did to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to Abimelech, king of Gerar, through taking Abraham's wife, who said of her, "She is my sister," lest they might kill him because of her, and think of taking her for a wife? And Yahuwah did to them and their people all that you heard of. Look, we ourselves saw with our eyes that Esau, Jacob's brother, came to him with 400 men, intending to kill him, for he remembered that he had taken away his father's blessing. And he went to meet him when he came from Syria, to strike the mother with the children, and who delivered him from his hands, but his Yahuwah, in whom he trusted. He delivered him from his brother's hand, and also from his enemies' hands, and surely he will protect them again. Who does not know that it was their Yahuwah who inspired them with strength to do to Shechem town the evil which you heard of? Could it have been by their own strength that 2 men destroyed such a large city as Shechem, had it not been for their Yahuwah in whom they trusted? He said and did all this to them, to kill the city's inhabitants in their city. Can you then prevail over them who have come together from your city to fight with all of them, even if 1,000 times more should come to help you? Surely you know and understand that you do not come to fight with them, but you come to war with their Yahuwah who chose them, and you have therefore all come today to be destroyed. Now therefore refrain from this evil which you are trying to bring upon yourselves, and it will be better for you not to battle with them, although they are few in number, because their Yahuwah is with them. When the Amorite kings heard all their advisers' words, their hearts were filled with terror, and they were afraid of Jacob's sons, and would not fight against them. They listened to their advisers' words, and the counselors' words greatly pleased the kings, and they did so. The kings turned and held back from Jacob's sons, for they dared not approach them to make war with them, for they were greatly afraid of them, and their hearts melted within them from fear of them. For this came from Elohim to them, for he heard his servants Isaac and Jacob's prayers, for they trusted in him. And all these kings returned with their camps that day, each to his own city, and they did not fight with Jacob's sons at that time. And Jacob's sons kept their position that day until evening, opposite Mount Sihon. And seeing that these kings did not come to fight against them, Jacob's sons returned home.